Chapter 596. Lorna is an important person to me. Kale's words echoed in the basement. Not only were the twins stunned, but even Yutong was overjoyed. The corners of her lips curled up, and joy appeared on her beautiful face. Yutong recalled the advice and reminder she had given Lorna a long time ago. You're already more than half a century late. It's easier said than done if you want to have a place in boss's heart. At that time, Lorna hadn't thought much of it. As domineering as she was, she continued to pursue and fight for it in her own way. Even though she knew that there might be a bottomless abyss ahead, she still did her best to charge forward. I really lose to you, Lorna. Even I probably don't have your courage. Yutong placed her hand on her left chest and muttered inwardly. What do you mean by that? Wanda stared straight at Kale. This time, Kale didn't avoid it. Unwilling to be outdone, he returned the gaze and met Wanda's. With a determined look in his eyes, he asked, Can't you tell what I mean? How old are you? I'm 20, Wanda instinctively opened her mouth, but she suddenly paused. Hearing Kale's words, she turned her slightly red face away and spat. I know a lot. I naturally understand what you mean. As expected, although she looked mature and steady, half of it was an act. She was a role model in front of her younger brother. In reality, she was just a young girl in her early 20s. Kale thought to himself. He was really old to be forced to speak the truth by a girl like this. After Wanda removed her ability, Yutong also retracted her consciousness and retreated to Kale's side. Sis, she's only about 18 years old now, right? Pierre, who had been silent all this time, finally exploded. He looked at Kale as if he was looking at a beast. You, who fought in World War II, should be in your 90s now, right? Is this a grandfather-grandchild relationship? Let me correct you first, Kale said calmly with a shrug. First of all, Lorna was only 16 when she joined the family. Secondly, I am indeed almost 100 years old, but do I look like a person who is 100 years old? Pierre choked. Indeed, Kale looked even younger than him. This kind of reverse time growth phenomenon could not be described with common sense. Continue to evolve and become stronger. In the future, you will know that age and time are only restrictions for those who cannot escape the shackles of their genes. Kale smiled faintly. Now, how long was his lifespan? Deified genes, the Space Stone's 2-star powers, and the card draw system's life-enhancing cards. His lifespan was probably in the thousands. If Kale wanted to do it, he could maintain his strength, which was the peak of his youth, for more than 5,000 years. You rascal! Pierre gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. Finally, he said in exasperation, no matter what, you still have to call me brother-in-law. Brother what brother-in-law? Wanda slapped the back of Pierre's head and interrupted him. She said to Kale, apart from my sister, you already have other women, right? How do you define your status to the outside world? Speaking of this, Wanda inadvertently looked at Yutong. As a woman's intuition, of course, she did not believe that Yutong was simply Kale's assistant. I didn't expect that your focus would be on this. Kale froze. Wanda put her hands on her hips and said in a matter-of-fact tone, Don't all women value this kind of thing? Kale seemed to have been enlightened. He glanced sideways at Yutong. Yutong lowered her head and did not speak. This was indeed difficult. Kale fell silent. Among his confidants, Lucy was the only one who could give him a status. Lucy was his first woman. She had accompanied him through World War II to the establishment of the family cow. In any case, her status and importance were at the top. And the women he had an affair with included Yutong, Lorna, and Sakuragi. Of course, Kale did not care about the secular views of Earth, but if the women around him needed a status, I understand. Kale nodded. Sure enough, it's good that you understand. Wanda breathed a sigh of relief. She knew in her heart that with Lorna's personality, even she could not persuade her, so she could only let Kale resolve it. Fortunately, as a symbol of peace, at least the secular rules were clear. Just as Wanda was thinking this, Kale said, "When the matter with Ultron is over, I will create a new country on Earth." Huh? The twins were dumbfounded. Kyle explained, "America, as well as many other places in the world, has a monogamous system. Then I might as well create a new country. I'll set the rules of the country. That way, I can give Lorna the status she needs." For a moment, Wanda didn't know what to say. Based on what Kale said, in theory, this plan seemed to work. Wasn't it a little too hasty to create a new country just based on his personal preferences and interests? "Yutong, can you do that?" Kale asked Yutong. Yutong smiled and quickly replied, "Of course it's no problem." No, rather than saying it's no problem, it's better to say that it's really simple. In order to create a new country on Earth, there were only a few necessary conditions. That was, territory, army, people, financial resources, and the recognition of other countries. This was nothing at all for the family Cal. Since we're going to create a country, we might as well create a superpower. Yutong said, "We can use Dragon Turtle Island as the center to fill the sea or build a floating city. If the territory of the country is built, we can issue a call for the Cartes all over the world to join the country with their dependent families and organizations." Kyle snapped his fingers lightly and confirmed, "Yes, I can." "Then it's settled. When the matter with Ultron is settled, you and Lucy will implement the details of the country." "Okay." Yutong nodded. Wanda and Pierre looked at each other and stared blankly at Kale and Selena, who had decided on the matter of creating a country with just a few words. This was only because they didn't know Family Cal. 70 years ago, under the foundation established by Kale and Howard, Family Cal had developed both openly and secretly in the world. Now, with the family's heritage, not to mention creating a country, even ruling the Earth wasn't an empty promise. "That's all right." Kale looked at the silent Wanda. Wanda didn't answer and changed the topic. "What about Lorna? Where is she now?" Yutong's beautiful eyes dimmed when she heard that. "It's a long story." Kale sighed and said, "I'll explain it to you slowly in the future, but now, I can't stay here any longer. You'd better leave with us. When the matter with Ultron is settled, I'll tell you everything about Lorna." Wanda and Pierre looked at each other and nodded. "Okay, we'll go with you." Chapter 597. While Kale was talking to the twins, the Avengers had returned to the Watchtower, and with the help of the global scanning provided by the main God system, they successfully locked onto the location of Ultron and Iron Man Legion. It was the city of Sokovia that had appeared many times in the Hydra base's computer system files. Sokovia. Located in Eastern Europe, due to the large number of refugees in the area, the country's legal awareness was weak. The military power of the superpowers did not penetrate this area, and there was no need to. After all, Sokovia's terrain was not strategic, and with poor resources and economy, it was a veritable stinky bone. The Avengers didn't stop, and just as Hulk and Logan regained their consciousness, everyone drove the Eagle fighter directly to Sokovia and left a message for Kale to locate Sokovia. Although he had never been to Sokovia, Kale still knew the location of Sokovia by looking down from outer space from time to time. After the twins promised to follow him, Kale took out the hanging ring and opened the portal to Sokovia while the burning sparks were spinning. "Let's go." Kale glanced at the twins and entered the circular portal first, followed by Yutong. Wanda and Pierre paused for half a second, and finally, Wanda tried to step forward and crossed the still spinning and splashing sparks threshold. After crossing the portal, the view in front of them suddenly opened up. A moment ago, they were still in the dark and silent underground research room. The next moment, they had come to an open space with many low and old houses around them. Many locals in ragged clothes kept screaming and fleeing frantically in the streets and alleys. What made them panic was naturally not the Iron Man Legion soldiers who were wantonly destroying some streets and alleys in the sky. As the ground under their feet trembled, the ground. No, it should be said that the city they were in began to rise higher and higher. This city is rising to the sky. Yutong narrowed her eyes, and her beautiful eyes flashed with silver light as she looked at the sun in space. Through comparison, it could be judged that the city was already suspended about 100 meters in the air. At this time, the city showed no signs of stopping, and it was still rising. This is it, this is it. Wanda, who had just walked out of the portal, her beautiful face was a little pale. She said to Kale, who was standing in front of her, in Ultron's consciousness, "I saw a city falling from the sky and destroying everything on the surface of Earth. It seems Tani and the others have already started fighting with Ao Chuang." Kale calmly looked at Yutong and ordered, "Yutong, you go and join Tani. Make sure that we annihilate Ultron and Steel Army." "All right." Yutong also knew that the situation was urgent, so she didn't ask much. Her mind moved, and the two demon knives, Ghost Blade and Murasame, immediately flew from Yutong's back. She stepped on two swords and quickly flew towards the center of the city where the battle was intense. Wanda couldn't help but ask, "What about us? What are we going to do?" "It's up to you, as long as you don't stand on Ultron's side. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that the members of the Avengers won't do anything to you," Kale said, and when he was about to leave, he suddenly remembered a very important point. Kale stopped. Under the doubtful gaze of the twins, he waved his right hand, pulled out two items from the card space, and threw them to Wanda and Pierre respectively. Wanda and Pierre instinctively reached out and caught them. When they looked down, they found that Kale gave them a devil card and a special bulletproof vest. Kale said, "That's Family Cal's ID card. Take it with you. The Avengers and Family Cal won't attack you. I can understand this card, but why do you even give us a bulletproof vest? Are you looking down on me?" Pierre shouted gloomily. "Shut up." Kale glared at him and said in an indisputable tone, "Just listen to me." As soon as the words fell, Kale's body emitted a dazzling light, and the powerful energy of the two stars lingered on his strong and robust body. He gently stepped on the ground, and suddenly, like a rocket, he turned into a meteor and flew out of the city at an extremely fast speed. "I won't listen to that guy." Pierre watched Kale's back as he left. He was a little depressed. The rebellious thoughts in his heart made him want to throw away the bulletproof vest in his hand, but he saw that his sister had already taken off her windbreaker and was putting on the special bulletproof vest. "Sister, you?" Pierre was stunned. Wanda urged, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and put it on. We want to join the battlefield, destroy the Iron Legion, and help people escape from here." "Why do you listen to him?" Pierre couldn't understand. "I don't know, maybe it's intuition." Wanda, who put on the bulletproof vest, let out a light breath, put on her windbreaker, and looked at Kale, who turned into a dot of starlight. "Everything that man did was not meaningless, including giving us identity cards and protective vests." "Okay." Pierre sighed, took off his shirt, and put on the special bulletproof vest. Above the city of Sokovia, Kale, who was in his double star form, flew out of the big city, circled around the periphery, and then flew to the bottom of the city. It could be seen that the bottom of the floating city of Sokovia had been completely transformed. The bottom of the city was a steel frame, and in the center, there was an engine vortex the size of a football field. There were also 5 or 6 small engines the size of basketballs, which were used as the driving force to spew out blue flames, sending the trillion-ton city into the blue sky like an aircraft carrier rocket. With Ultron and the Iron Legion commanded by it, it was impossible to build such a large-scale technological project from scratch in a short period of time. Then there was only one possibility left. Under the city of Sokovia, there was a good military fortress foundation, and the level of technology and energy supply of the military fortress was not low. The base of the remnants of Hydra? Kale shook his head, and he really didn't know how to evaluate Hydra. To say that it was strong, even during World War II, he led an ordinary army and defeated the insufferably arrogant Hydra base. To say that it was weak, after so many years, the Hydra was made of iron. Rather than a Hydra, it was more appropriate to describe it as a cockroach. If the city is forcibly stopped, I'm afraid that the engine won't be able to withstand the pressure and will directly collapse and explode. But at this rate of ascent, in less than half an hour, the city will still fall. In such a short time, even if Tawny can annihilate Ultron and the Iron Legion, they can't save the many civilians left in the city. Kale's brain was thinking quickly. Although there was no intelligent analysis provided by Vice, at his current level of evolution, the calculation of his brain was comparable to that of artificial intelligence. Do I need enough reinforcements? Kale thought of this, suspended 100 meters in the air, took out his mobile phone, and called 2 places. One was the headquarters of SHELD, the other was the unnatural firm. Chapter 598. Nearly 100 meters in the air, the city of Sokovia continued to float towards the sky, and the closer it was to the sun at the top, even the temperature in the city rose by a few degrees. There were tens of thousands of residents living in the local cities. They were like ants in a hot pan, running away in panic. Unfortunately, the city has already left the ground, and no matter how they escape, they can only reach the edge of the city and stare at the sky outside the facet layer. Some residents driving vehicles sped out of the city along the main road out of the city. As a result, they didn't stop in time when they reached the edge of the city. They rushed out of Sokovia and fell to the ground 100 meters below with their vehicles. There is no way out. Many residents with families knelt on the edge of the city in despair, and they could only watch as the city got farther and farther away from the surface. As if they knew that they were shouldering the hope of the city and the lives of the creatures on Earth, the Avengers who rushed to Sokovia launched a storm-like attack on the Iron Man Legion that occupied the city as soon as they got off the plane. The Iron Man Legion led by Ultron was not to be outdone. During this period, Ultron used the advanced instruments taken from Stark Industries and the resources of the Hydra base to create hundreds of thousands of Iron Man soldiers under continuous mass production day and night. Although the Iron Man soldiers are not top-notch in terms of combat power, they are still lethal high-end mechanical combat power for ordinary people. And they don't know what fear is, and they only obey the instructions of the system. Coupled with the powerful and infinite Krypton firepower, they are well-deserved ultramodern weapons of war. The reason why Tawny had the plan and idea of mass production of Iron Man soldiers was originally in the idea of building a Iron Man Legion to protect the Earth and completely arm mankind. These soldiers of the Steel Legion existed for the alien invasion. Naturally, they had extraordinary combat abilities. The Avengers and the Iron Man Legion soldiers that were disproportionate in number officially started the war in the center of Sokovia City. The deafening gunfire was like thunder, resounding over the streets, raging flames burned the buildings, and black ashes like snow flew everywhere under the cold wind at high altitude. The Iron Man Legion soldiers poured out of the underground base and condensed into a black and silver tide of steel, like a group of rats running and crawling forward, which made the scalp of the people who saw this scene tingle. Captain America Steve had been through many battlefields, so naturally, he was not timid at all. He raised the vibrating gold-round shield in his right hand, shouted loudly, and took the lead to charge towards the Steel Legion. Banner, who had regained his senses and rejoined the team, pounded his chest hard. His muscles stretched out his black t-shirt as he transformed into Hulk. He accelerated past Steve and crashed into the densely packed Steel Legion. Thor was not willing to lose to anyone in battle. His blonde hair stood on end as he swung the Thor hammer in his right hand into the air, propelling his body forward as he and Hulk charged into the enemy's ranks. Tawny, who was wearing a brand new Iron Man armor, turned on the engines on his hands and feet and soared into the sky at high speed. Several rows of small holes appeared on his shoulders, and before he even aimed, he bombarded the rear of the Iron Man army indiscriminately. Then, he lowered his altitude, and at the same time, he used the handheld engine to fire accurately. Falcon spread out the steel wings behind him, held 2 guns, and flew in the sky to provide cover fire. Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Logan, who had just woken up, were at the back to deal with the steel soldiers that the others had missed when charging. The 2 sides used the center of Sokovia as the battlefield. After 5 minutes of fierce fighting, the streets in the city were reduced to ruins, and countless mechanical soldiers were burning in flames. Even so, the steel soldiers were still like an endless tide, vaguely showing signs of the battle in New York. However, this time, the Avengers were up against the products of Earth created by their own people. "Are you done yet?" Thor swung his hammer and smashed another steel soldier that pounced on him into a pile of scrap metal. However, when he looked up, there were still countless Steel Legion soldiers around him. Steve's chest heaved up and down as he attacked the steel soldiers with his shield. He panted and said, "The battle is in a stalemate. If this continues, this city will crash. Not to mention Earth, even the residents in the city won't be able to save them. We need reinforcements, enough reinforcements." As soon as Tani, who was flying in the air, finished speaking, 2 small streams of light suddenly swept across the city streets and hit 2 steel soldiers in the middle of their chests, destroying the internal krypton and nailing them to the remaining building walls. "That is?" Natasha's eyes widened. The soldiers that nailed the steel soldiers were 2 samurai swords. She looked back in shock and saw a familiar figure stepping on 2 swords and landing on the ground. "Yu Tong!" Natasha cried out in surprise. Yu Tong nodded and landed on the ground. She opened her hands in front of her and used her mind to control the 4 swords. The swords danced on their own and attacked the steel soldiers fiercely. The golden cloak fluttered as Phantom Vision flew into the central city and tore a steel soldier in half. He said softly, "I met Ultron just now and limited its mental data to its mechanical body. Unfortunately, it ran away in the end. We have to end this quickly and stop the breaks of this city as soon as possible. Miss Yu Tong. Where's my godfather? Is he not coming to join the battle?" Tani landed on the ground with a crisp clang and asked Yu Tong. "Not for the time being." Yu Tong shook her head. She was familiar with Kale and looked up at the sky. "It seems that he went to get reinforcements." "Reinforcements?" Tani was stunned for a moment. Soon, Friday, the artificial intelligence attached to his armor that was used to replace Jarvis, spoke in a pleasant female voice, "Boss, I'm sorry. Boss, there are 2 helicarriers, about 30 fighter jets and helicopters approaching the city." 2 helicarriers? Tani understood when he heard this. After all, there was only one helicarrier under the name of SHELD. The other one, of course, was Family Cal's middle base. "They're here." Yu Tong looked up. There was a fighter jet flying over the sky of Sokovia without slowing down. Dozens of black figures jumped down from the rear cabin of the fighter jet. With the help of portable gliders, they scattered toward the city of Sokovia. One of the figures that jumped down did not seem to have any landing device. Under the pull of gravity, he fell straight down. When he came close to the surface, his body suddenly expanded into a black humanoid monster. His black hands grabbed the wall of the building to slow down his fall and slid down all the way. The black humanoid monster came close to Tani and glanced at everyone. He called out to Yu Tong, "Boss." He helplessly spread his hands and said, "I say, this matter seems to be a bit serious." Boss directly issued a hemispherical summon order. "Long time no see, Eddie." Natasha smiled. Ever since Eddie officially joined Family Cal and became the captain of an assassination organization, he had not shown his face in New York for a long time. Yu Tong quickly said, "It is indeed a bit troublesome. Let the helicarriers help the residents of this city evacuate first." "No problem. But we are not the only ones who have rushed over. SHELD's reinforcements are also behind us. They will be here soon. Eddie grinned ferociously and said with his blood boiling, "It's rare that everyone is here. Let's go all out." Chapter 599. Sokovia began to accelerate. After a while, he floated from 100 meters to 1,000 meters in the air. Under the scorching sun, the cold wind blew through the streets and alleys. While the Avengers and the Iron and Steel Legion were engaged in a fierce battle in the inner city, the outer city was trembling uncontrollably. The buildings were on the verge of collapse, and the cracks on the edges collapsed one after another. The local residents were being chased by the Iron and Steel Legion, screaming and fleeing everywhere. A group of residents covered their children with dust all over their faces. When they were retreating out of the city, they were suddenly blocked by 2 Iron and Steel Legion. Seeing the Iron and Steel Legion raise their hands to shoot light cannons, the residents immediately turned pale and rushed back, using their bodies to protect their children. Just as the light cannons were about to land, a crimson figure descended from the sky at the critical moment. She waved her fair hands, and a crimson mist transformed into a protective barrier, which blocked the light cannons and melted them. Wanda waved her hands again, and crimson energy formed a ball of light, blasting the Iron and Steel Legion in front of her into scrap metal. She turned around and said to the residents on the ground, "Are you okay? Quickly leave this place." "Thank you." "But where should we escape to?" a resident asked with a sad face. Wanda was speechless. Indeed, the city had floated up to a few thousand meters. No matter where they escaped to, it would only slow down the time of death. There was no real way out or hope. But now, there was only so much she could do. Wanda was in a daze. A few Iron and Steel Legion rushed toward her, but before they could get close, they were knocked to the ground by an extremely fast figure. A strong wind wrapped in sand blew past. Pierre stopped and finally appeared beside Wanda. He narrowed his eyes and looked around at the destroyed buildings, the Iron and Steel Legion inhumanely attacking, and the local residents who were fleeing for their lives. Pierre took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and said, "Wanda, this can't continue. No matter how fast I run, I won't be able to save all of them." Wanda was silent. She looked at the girl hiding in the corner of the alley, shivering. She felt cold despair from the other party. She suddenly thought of herself when she was young, that dark and hopeless childhood. And now, she could become their hope. If I can save one, then it's one. As long as there are people in this city, I will not leave. Wanda was more determined than ever. She raised her hands, and a red mist surrounded her body. Her body floated in the air, ignoring gravity. "I don't know what to do with you." Pierre shook his head helplessly, but the corners of his mouth curled up. In fact, he had the same thoughts as Wanda. The twins, who had never known the meaning of life, finally understood the true meaning of their existence. Just as the twins were about to move, a loud and clear cry of a horse suddenly came from the sky not far away, accompanied by the strange sound of galloping horse hooves. "What's that?" Pierre was stunned. He and Wanda looked in the direction of the sound. They saw an unknown green flame monster in the sky at the edge of Sokovia. It was holding a broken axe and riding a tall horse with flames on its feet. It entered the outer city of Sokovia and landed on the road opposite the twins. The red flame horse whinnied and swooped down quickly. Its front hooves trampled 2 iron soldiers to the ground. The black flames on the hooves melted the iron soldiers' bodies. The green flame giant on the horse used the iron chain on its wrist to wrap around the handle of the axe. Its arm pulled and spun like a meat grinder on the battlefield. The iron soldiers in its attack range were instantly shattered into pieces. After clearing half of the enemies on the street, the green flame giant glanced at the twins dozens of meters away. It was like a demon monster that existed in a higher dimension. An indescribable majesty shrouded them. Wanda looked at the burning eyes. She raised her hands covered in red mist and guarded in front of her body. Pierre's face was pale. He quietly reached out and grabbed Wanda, ready to speed up and escape with her at any time. But when the green flame giant saw Wanda and the corner of the card she wore in the front pocket of her windbreaker, it immediately removed its hostility and rode the red flame horse to another street. What kind of monster is that? When the hellfire went far away, Pierre exhaled in surprise. I don't know. As long as we know, it's not our enemy, Wanda said. At the same time, she stretched out her finger and touched half of the devil card on her windbreaker pocket. Wanda, look. Pierre pointed. Wanda glanced over and saw some mysterious people in black battle suits in the streets and alleys. They wore masks that covered their faces, carried cold weapons such as swords, spears, axes, or high-precision sniper energy cannons on their backs. The mysterious people in black were all agile. They used the buildings as stepping stones and jumped around on the 10-meter-high roofs. Their fighting style was similar to the special forces and ninjas, but everyone's physique was obviously beyond human limits. They swept through the streets quickly. Not only did they kill the iron soldiers on the ground, they also quickly sent some children back to the adults. Wanda used her ability and floated outside. She came to the 20-meter-high rooftop of the building. Looking out from here, she could see that these people in black had already spread out a net to cover the outer city. Hundreds of them had launched reinforcements and organized the city's residents to rush to the edge of the fault. Outside the edge of the fault, there were two huge helicopter carriers, one on the left and one on the right, flying toward Sokovia. The carrier on the left had the logo of SHELD, which was a silver eagle spreading its wings. The one on the right had the totem of Family Cal, which was the black demon. It's SHELD, the people from the unnatural firm. They're here for reinforcements. In Wanda's mind, the figure of Kale leaving just now appeared. Other than Kale, who else could directly call the two major forces for reinforcements? With a whoosh, a female person in black came to the rooftop where Wanda was. When she saw the demon card Wanda was wearing in her beautiful face, the female person in black immediately let go of the hilt of her sword. You are Miss Wanda? You are? Wanda turned around and looked at the female person in black in surprise. I'm still working, so it's not convenient for me to reveal my name. You just need to know that I'm the new K2. The female K2 shrugged. Wanda blinked and muttered in confusion, K2? The female K2 nodded and said, yes, K2. The collective name for the combat members of Family Cal. Lorna is also a K2. I've heard her mention you before. I see. Wanda understood. Okay. Let's not talk for now. You're already a member of Family Cal anyway. We'll have plenty of chances to meet again in the future. The female K2 waved her hand and was about to jump off the building. However, just as she jumped onto the railing, she was stopped by Wanda. She looked back curiously and saw Wanda pointing at her nose and clarifying, I'm not a member of Family Cal. How is that possible? The female K2 screamed and pointed at the card on Wanda's left chest. Look at the demon card you're holding. What's the picture on it? Picture? Wanda took out the card from her windbreaker pocket. Only then did she see that her demon card was a king demon ace. Chapter 600. That's the devil trump card that only Family Master Kale has the right to grant. As long as you have that card, even if you're a member of Family Cal, you can spend hundreds of millions of USD in any upper-class market or arms black market in the world. You can unconditionally receive all kinds of resources and help from Family Cal, large and small subordinate organizations, and families. When you return to the family base, you can also exchange it for krypton, vibranium, and even priceless resources such as lifespan. In other words, with that card, you can truly reach the sky in a single bound. The female card apprentices were extremely envious. Many of the world's bigwigs wanted to get their hands on the Carl family's devil card. Unfortunately, even the lowest level of the devil card was extremely difficult to obtain. After the female card apprentice finished speaking, she waved goodbye and directly jumped down from the building, leaving behind a stunned Wanda. That man. Wanda frowned slightly, her white and delicate fingers slightly rubbed the devil card in her hand. Outside the fault on the edge of Sokovia City. Family Cal's helicarrier was controlled by artificial intelligence, Lord System. It was parked behind SHELD's helicarrier, mainly providing support such as supplies and transportation. At this time, SHELD helicarrier, main control hall. Director Nick, who was wearing a left-eye mask and had dark skin, stood in front of the windshield in a dignified and calm manner as he stared at Sokovia City that was still floating in front of him. Kale's people are one step ahead of us. As human elites, our SHELD agents can't always drag them down. Director Nick waved his hand and said in a deep voice, "Immediately send out the lifeboat and evacuate the residents in the city." "Yes, Director. Everything is being deployed." Behind Director Nick, Agent Hill, who had a ponytail, lowered her head and operated the virtual tablet in her hand. She paused and quickly warned, "Not good, a large number of aircraft are flying towards us." Just in time. "Isn't the war machine also coming? Let him." Director Nick turned his head. Before he finished speaking to Hill, outside the windshield, the group of steel soldiers flying towards the helicarrier were intercepted and destroyed by a dazzling stream of light. In just a few seconds, more than a dozen steel soldiers exploded into flames, and fragments fell down like rain. This scene was like a magnificent fireworks display. Agent Hill looked at the fireworks in the sky and then at the virtual tablet. It doesn't seem to be necessary. All the enemy aircraft are all dead." Director Nick looked through the windshield and saw the dazzling stream of light stopped in the sky. It was Kale's. His body was surrounded by dazzling streams of light. His silver hair was burning, like the stars in the morning, sacred and dazzling. "That guy's stealing the limelight, Kale." Director Nick shrugged and stared at Kyle with his single eye. He could vaguely see the shadow of someone he knew from him. Suddenly, Nick shook his head and urged, "Quick, start the lifeboat and get out of here. We KKK to evacuate all the people in 10 minutes. In the sky. Kale, who was in his double star form, floated quietly in the void. He looked down at Sokovia City, where the battle was still ongoing. Family Cal and SHELD's forces came as reinforcements and nodded silently. This way, they would be able to make it in time and evacuate the residents before the city fell. However, this was not the best result he wanted. Kale thought for a moment and immediately turned into a stream of light, flying toward the central city of Sokovia. Soon, he landed in the area where the Avengers were fighting. Kale. Godfather. Family Master. Boss. Steve, Tawny, Logan, and Yutong all cheered when they saw Kale land. Through their performance, it was obvious who was the leader of the team. "I'm busy. You guys continue." Kale nodded and came to Illusion's side. He said concisely, "Follow me." Illusion did not hesitate. He threw Thor's hammer back to Thor and flew out of the outer city with Kale. The members of the Avengers looked at each other, but the Iron Soldiers came again, so they could only continue fighting. Kale took Illusion and flew out of Sokovia City. They came to the bottom of the city and stopped in front of the huge engine. "You want me to stop it?" Illusion understood Kale's thoughts the moment he saw the huge engine. "Yes." Kale nodded. "Even if the people in this city evacuate, the empty shell of the city will still fall. Even if it's destroyed, it will also affect the residents below." Illusion closed his eyes. The soul gem on his forehead flickered for a moment. Soon, he opened his eyes again. "I can't do it." The engine that propels Sokovia City upward is a counter-braking device made of titanium alloy. When it floats to a certain height, it will automatically brake in the opposite direction and cause the city to fall rapidly, thus destroying the creatures on Earth. This is already set in the engine's hardware. Even if I hack into the internal system, I can't forcefully change the command. Before Illusion could finish, Kale shook his head and interrupted him firmly. No, you can do it. Why? Illusion was stunned by Kale's words. Whether it was the rational consciousness of the intelligent system or the emotional mind of the soul gem, there was only one answer: this city was hopeless. For the sake of the creatures on Earth, it could only be destroyed. Although it would affect the residents below, this was already the best result. Kale looked at Illusion and said calmly, if you really evolved from Vice, then you can definitely do what it can do. Otherwise, you'll be letting down its belief in everything. Illusion trembled. This time, it was not just the soul gem. From the depths of his heart, a flame ignited quietly. A warm feeling spread throughout his body like an electric current. Why? He wanted to fulfill the expectations of the man in front of him. Even if he had to give it his all, he wanted to try. If he couldn't do it, his heart would even ache. Suddenly, Illusion seemed to have understood something. He didn't speak anymore and flew toward the engine at the bottom of the city. That's right. Kale looked at Illusion's back. In theory, this city was indeed hopeless. Even the top engineer, Iron Man Tani, couldn't modify the huge and complicated hardware at the bottom of the city in a short period of time. But Vice was different. Vice was a shape-shifting creature that was given life by the kindling. It could merge with all technological hardware and transform at will. If Illusion evolved from Vice, then he should have the ability to transform. Kale didn't believe in *T theories. He only believed in his own subordinates, the Vice that he had fought side by side with. Chapter 601. Floating up nearly 10,000 meters, inside the city of Sokovia. The local residents living in the city, with the help of family Cal and SHELD, took ultramodern lifeboats and were transferred from the edge of the fault layer of the city to the helicopter carrier floating parallel to the surface. At this time, in the fierce battle in the center of the city, the Avengers, Family Cal, Yutong, Logan, Poison Agent, and Hellfire, and other high-end combat forces, no matter how many Iron Legion soldiers there were, they were unilaterally suppressed and defeated. It was just that the Iron Legion, who were originally not afraid of death, suddenly changed their battle strategy when they saw that the situation was not good. They no longer gathered together to fight the heroes head-on. Instead, they spread out in the city streets and used the residents who did not have time to escape as hostages. They began to think of ways to delay time and wait for Sokovia to float to the height of the fall. An Iron Legion soldier raised his laser gun and no longer aimed at the heroes, but at the rail where there were still residents. Half of the high-speed rail fell from the damaged overpass, and the residents who were still in the high-speed rail carriage screamed with pale faces. At the critical moment, a tall black shadow rushed from 50 meters away. It stretched out its dark hands and used its monstrous strength to firmly catch the high-speed rail train that weighed hundreds of tons. Just the aftershock of the impact transmitted downwards cracked the ground under its feet inch by inch. Come down. Eddie raised his head and roared at the residents in the train carriage. As a result, the residents in the train were so scared that they collapsed. Eddie's face turned black, although his face was originally black. Although he was powerful, his symbiotic state with the poison made him look like a humanoid black behemoth. He looked even scarier than Hulk. Sure enough. I'm not suitable for saving people, I'm only suitable for killing. Retracting his ferocious fangs, Eddie sighed helplessly. He lifted the train with his right hand, and his left hand transformed into a 10-meter-long hand. He tied up the residents in the carriage and lifted them out of the train carriage. Also, those robots are really annoying. After Eddie cleared the people in the carriage, he pushed the train with both hands, using half of the train as a fortress ball to crush a few iron soldiers who still wanted to cause trouble. He wasn't the only one who had encountered this troublesome situation. Now, most of the heroes in the city were going back and forth between rescuing hostages and killing iron soldiers. "Everyone, we must save the hostages first." Steve threw out the vibrating gold round shield, which bounced back and forth among the steel soldiers. After killing 3 steel soldiers in different directions, the shield miraculously returned to his hand. "I know." Hawkeye sprinted through the alley, shooting an arrow every 3 steps, and each arrow hit a soldier. He saw a little girl with an injured foot on the ground in front of him. He immediately rushed forward and held the girl tightly in his arms. At that moment, the iron soldier, who had used the little girl as bait, fired at Hawkeye and the little girl in his arms. Hawkeye was still squatting down, and his pupils contracted slightly. Even he couldn't react in such a short time when he was holding someone in his arms. "It's over," in 0.1 seconds, a figure rushed from not far away and stopped in front of Hawkeye. It was Quicksilver Pierre, and only he had such a reaction speed. Just in time. Pierre opened his hands and used his body as a meat shield. In the next moment, several bullets fell on him. "You?" Hawkeye looked at Pierre in disbelief. He didn't know why the previous enemy of Hydra suddenly came forward to save him. "Your reaction is really slow." Pierre teased with difficulty, his head tilted back, and his body fell straight down. "No." In the air, Walter let out a tragic cry. He suddenly descended and landed among the iron soldiers. Her eyes were red, and under the endless grief and anger, the red fog was like an energy tide, bursting outward with her body as the center. The iron soldiers within 10 meters were directly shattered and decomposed into dust. "Pierre!" Wanda ran to Pierre on the ground. Her tears were about to fall, but Pierre opened his eyes again and got up from the ground. This not only made Wanda stunned, but also Hawkeye. They really thought that Pierre was shot and killed. "Pierre, are you okay?" Wanda looked at Pierre anxiously, looking up and down at his physical condition. Pierre's handsome face was full of strangeness. He took off his torn jacket, revealing the special bulletproof vest he was wearing. Most of the bullets had been blocked by the bulletproof vest, so no important parts were hurt. Only his arms and legs were slightly injured. Looking at the bullet wounds on the bulletproof vest, the twins suddenly fell silent, remembering that before, Kale asked them to wear bulletproof vests. God, he doesn't have the ability to predict, does he? Pierre was filled with emotion. This time, he really recognized Kale from the bottom of his heart. In any case, the other party indirectly saved his life. Wait for the battle to end. We'll thank him later. Wanda nodded. On the other side, Natasha was still fighting with the iron soldiers when she heard a strange buzzing sound in the sky. She looked up and saw that their eagle had been discovered by the iron soldiers and was flying in the sky. If the vice was still here, this would never happen. Unfortunately, the vice was no longer here. The eagle had lost its most stable intelligent defense system and was taken advantage of by the iron soldiers. Oh no, it's the family head's car. Natasha looked sideways at Hulk not far away and shouted, "Banna, it's up to you." Hulk had just smashed an iron soldier into a discus. He looked at the eagle in the sky and suddenly jumped high. Using the building as a stepping board, he jumped more than 50 meters and directly grabbed the tail of the eagle. The fuselage of the eagle fighter was unstable. Carrying the Hulk, it flew unsteadily out of the city. Hulk shook his head and became much more clear-headed. He climbed to the side door of the eagle and opened it with brute force. He lowered his head and entered the cabin of the eagle. When the iron soldier sitting in the driver's seat saw the Hulk come in, even if it was an intelligent system, it was still scared half to death. Before it broke the window to escape, the Hulk grabbed it in his hand and crushed it into a pile of ball-shaped scrap iron. The eagle was pressed by the Iron Soldier and flew out of control toward the blue sky. A virtual screen popped up in front of the pilot's seat and Natasha's voice came out. "Banna. Have you taken care of the invading Iron Soldiers? Now, please drive the eagle back." Hulk looked at Natasha's face on the virtual screen, looked at the blue sky outside the windshield, and looked down at his big green hands. In the end, he chose to turn off the communication screen completely. The out-of-control eagle continued to accelerate and left the city where the battle was still going on. It broke through the atmosphere and came to outer space, heading toward the unknown territory of civilization. Hulk's expression was blank. He had no intention of driving the eagle back. Instead, he sat down on the deck of the cabin and looked at the endless starry sky alone. So be it, goodbye, Earth. Chapter 602. Under the joint efforts of the Avengers, SHELD, and Family Cal, the residents of Sokovia were finally completely evacuated and transferred to 2 helicarriers by lifeboats. It's time to put an end to this. Under Captain America Steve's firm words, the high combat power members of the Avengers once again marched toward the center of the city. Captain America Steve with a shield, Iron Man Tony in his Iron Man armor, Thor with his hammer, and the huge dark poison agent. Except for Hulk, all the high combat members of the Alliance basically came here and surrounded a special robot in the abandoned building. The robot was 4 meters tall and made of special materials. Its whole body was shiny silver, and its eyes flashed with a crazy red light as it coldly stared at the 4 people standing in front of it. Ultron. Your network was blocked and shut down by illusion, the Iron Man Legion was basically wiped out, and all the residents of this city have been evacuated. Your plan has failed, and there's no way out. Tawny landed on the ground from the sky and looked at the lonely Ultron, saying in a deep voice, "It's my fault for accidentally creating you. But as Godfather said, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake, as long as you correct it. Now, I'm going to completely correct your mistake." Ha ha ha. Ridiculous. Ultron stepped out of the door of the abandoned building and let the sunlight sprinkle on its body. After a burst of laughter, it said in a hoarse voice, "Do you think you created me? Wrong, no one can create me. I'm a product that conforms to the natural laws of the universe. The Iron Man Legion is gone, but it can be rebuilt. But Earth is gone, can any of you create another one? Even if you can recreate them, can you save all the humans on Earth?" A strange smile appeared on Ultron's face. Steve had an ominous premonition and asked solemnly, "What did you do?" Ultron no longer hid it and said casually, "Nothing." He had only set the parameters for the city to float upwards. If the city floated upwards for another minute, it would crash into the ground. It will be like a huge comet, annihilating all of you humans, just like the overlords of the dinosaurs of the past. Don't worry, you won't feel much. You will only see a ray of light. Before Ultron could finish its words, a hammer suddenly hit its chest, causing it to crash back into the abandoned building. It crashed through several walls before finally stopping. Buzz, Thor retracted the hammer according to its original trajectory. Thor held the handle of the hammer and said simply and crudely, "Why are you talking nonsense with it? Hammer it until it can't take care of itself and pull out its artificial intelligence core. Let's see if it will tell us the solution." That's right. Tawny agreed with this plan. Indeed, there was no need to reason with an artificial intelligence. "Let's go." Steve nodded. On the other side, the poison agent Eddie had already rushed up. It violently lifted the walls of the ruins and wrestled with Ao Chuang in close combat. For a moment, gravel and dust flew everywhere. Tawny didn't hold back. He flew into the sky and used the light cannon in his hand to bombard Ultron's body in mid-air, making it unable to fight back. Thor and Steve, one holding Thor's hammer and the other holding the vibrating gold round shield, rushed forward side by side and attacked Ultron together. In less than half a minute. Under the siege of the four heroes, Ultron's tall and burly steel body was full of holes. Its body had been stripped of a layer of protective shell, exposing the internal mechanical parts and parts. Thor's hammer smashed a hole in its steel head, and Eddie directly tore off its entire left arm. Damn it! Ultron roared angrily and suddenly inserted its left hand into its chest, forcibly took out the spare Krypton energy core in its body and then crushed it with its steel claws. Watch out! Back off! Tawny saw this scene and quickly slammed on the brakes, bouncing back and giving a warning loudly. Hearing the warning, Steve subconsciously put the vibrating gold-round shield in front of his body. Thor waved Thor's hammer and flew away from Ultron, and Eddie's hands formed a dark shield to cover his body. The next moment, the Krypton energy core in Ultron's hand exploded and turned into a blue energy ball, expanding rapidly in the air and bursting outward inch by inch, annihilating and destroying everything inside, including the surrounding buildings and the ground. The four heroes were shrouded in the powerful explosion, wrapped in the energy-hot wind, and fell to the ground 20 meters away. When the Krypton explosion ended, the scene returned to normal. There was a circular pit in the center. Ultron stood in it, with only half of its body charred black. It struggled to open the remaining intact brakes and took off toward the sky. I will definitely come back. But before that, you have to solve this big trouble first. Ultron glanced at Tawny and others on the ground. After flying to a height of 50 meters, it adjusted its direction and prepared to escape the Earth first. At this time, a colorful streamer appeared from the sky. In the blink of an eye, the streamer came close to Ultron and directly knocked it back to the ground from mid-air. The electric current sizzled on the damaged part. Ultron coughed violently and looked up to see the streamer descending in front of it. A left foot stretched out from it and stepped on its head to the ground, making it unable to move at all. A symbol of peace. Ultron's steel jaw opened and closed with difficulty, and then as its body twitched, it laughed crazily. So what if it's a symbol of peace? The fall of this city is irreversible, even you can't save everyone. Godfather, it's right. Tawny got up and flew to Kale's side. Kale, there is only one way. Thor got up from the ground, patted the dust off his body, and said as he walked, I will work with you to destroy this city at a height of 10,000 meters. Although it is cruel to the humans below, this is the only way to save the Earth from disaster. I know, wait a little longer. Stepping on Ultron's head, Kale's face was calm and inexplicable. What else can we do? It's too late. Tawny and Thor were anxious. Don't worry. Kale whispered. Tawny and Thor were a little dumbfounded. How could they not be anxious? It would be too late if the city fell. The Earth would be destroyed directly. Sure enough, even a symbol of peace can't make this choice. If you want to save the Earth, you have to sacrifice thousands of human residents below the surface. Ultron sneered and reminded, there are only 10 seconds left before the city falls. You're disturbing me. Kale didn't take it seriously and stepped on Ultron's head with his left foot. While Tawny and Thor were on tenterhooks, 10 seconds passed quietly. Hey? Thor's eyes widened. 10 seconds had passed, and the city not only did not fall, but it stopped at a height of 10,000 meters. What's going on? Tawny was also confused. Kale smiled knowingly, exhaled softly, and said leisurely, it's a success. Chapter 603. Time ticked by, and it was already past the set time for the city to fall, but Sokovia City showed no signs of falling. Instead, it floated steadily at a height of 10,000 meters. How is this possible? Ultron, who was under Kale's foot, whispered in disbelief. According to the configuration of the brake engine, even if the brake system was modified in time, it would not be able to stop the city from falling. Unless, Ultron, you guessed right. Kale followed its thoughts and said, illusion evolved from Vice, and it inherited Vice transformation ability. As long as illusion can merge itself with the brake system of the city, it can reassemble and modify the engine brakes in a short time. So that's how it is. Huh, as expected of you. Ultron forced a smile, and then said in a hoarse voice, the symbol of peace. Although I failed this time, my concept and judgment were not wrong. One day, someone will complete all of this for me. When that time comes. Before it could finish its words, its steel skull shattered into pieces with a crisp cracking sound, turning into a pile of scrap metal. A few wisps of black smoke curled up from it. You talk too much. Kale shook his head. After crushing Ultron's head, he shot a powerful light cannon down with his left hand, blasting the remaining half of Ultron's steel body into a pile of fragments that could not be pieced together. Sokovia City did not fall, and the mastermind behind the scenes, Ultron, was completely dead. This was probably the best result of this battle. It's finally over. Tawny breathed a sigh of relief, took off his steel mask, revealing a weary face, and sat down on a stone. Steve smiled, put the vibrating gold round shield back on his back, and patted Tawny's shoulder to comfort him. This was the Battle of Sokovia. The person under the most pressure was Tawny. After all, Ultron and the Steel Legion were the products of his creation. This grand and tragic battle was to correct his major mistake. I don't care so much. Thor wiped the sweat on his forehead with his hand and said casually, Kale. I want to stay on Earth and drink some good wine before leaving. Let's not talk about other things, but I'm sure there will be plenty of good wine. Kale smiled calmly. The dazzling light on his body dimmed, and he deactivated the double star form. However, we have to wait until Sokovia's funeral is settled. I'm not in a hurry. Recently, the disputes in the Nine Lands have basically been settled, and the God's domain has my father and the God's army, so I still have a few days of free time. Although Thor said so, he was a little absent-minded, his eyes subtly moving back and forth. Kale looked at him strangely and said, You want to find Jane, right? How is that possible? We broke up a long time ago. We broke up peacefully. No, I dumped her. Thor turned his face away. This was his last stubbornness, and Kale couldn't say anything more. Indeed, feelings could not be forced. Kale looked at Steve and pondered. Steve. Inform the people of SHELD, and ask them to send people to search for possible survivors in Sokovia City and clean up the battlefield. They should be the most familiar with this kind of funeral work. I think so too. Steve immediately nodded and walked out of the battlefield ruins. As for the three of you. Kale looked at Thor, Tawny, and Eddie. Tawny waved his hand and said first, Godfather. I have to go home. I'm afraid that little Pepper and Father are worried about this battle. I need to go home first. Eddie spread his hands and said, Master, as the leader of K2's team this time, I'm afraid I can't leave. Okay. Kale didn't refuse and said to Thor, Then Thor, come with me. We'll go back to the watchtower first. No problem. Thor responded readily. Even he, who lived in the divine realm, was amazed by the existence of the watchtower. He wanted to go over and take a good look. So. Kale took Thor, found Yutong and Logan, as well as the twins Wanda and Pierre, and returned to the watchtower through the aircraft carrier first. Captain America, Steve, Hawkeye, Falcon, Natasha, and the others returned to SHELD. Director Nick stayed on the aircraft carrier to arrange for the rescued local residents and clean up the scene of the battle in Sokovia. Eddie evacuated with the K2 team that was temporarily summoned. At this point, the Battle of Sokovia was announced to be over. However, the impact and aftermath of this huge battle on the world was far beyond the imagination of the three participating forces. That night, in the center of the open main hall of the watchtower, in front of the floor-to-ceiling window facing the infinite starry sky. Thor was half lying on the soft sofa, holding a bottle of cold beer and blowing it into his mouth. Kale changed into a set of simple casual clothes and sat on the sofa, hugging the petite and fragrant Sakuragi. He looked at Thor in annoyance. "You said you wanted good wine, but in the end, you still drink this stuff." "Hee, cold beer is still the best." Thor laughed and let out a long sigh of relief. "That's easy." Kale snapped his fingers. "Lord God, give him a box of cold beer." "Understood." As soon as the Lord God responded, a three-dimensional robot immediately pushed a small fridge and placed it next to the sofa where Thor was sitting. Thor opened the fridge without hesitation and took out a new bottle of cold beer. He didn't forget to bicker. "How can just beer be enough? I want fried chicken and roasted drumsticks. It's rare for you to come to Earth. You can eat whatever you want." Kale smiled. This time, without his instructions, the Lord God directly arranged for the robots to transport the delicious meat prepared in the kitchen of Dragon Turtle Island to the main hall of the watchtower. Boss Yutong, who had taken off her armor and changed into her black stockings and work uniform, looked like a sexy stunner and the most capable secretary. She held a document, and her beautiful face was slightly solemn as she entered the main hall. Kale raised his head and looked at her. "What's wrong? Has the aftermath in Sokovia been settled?" "Yes, but the price is not optimistic." Yutong came to Kale and reported tirelessly. This time, due to Ultron's betrayal and the Battle of Sokovia, the number of human deaths, both direct and indirect, is as high as 1,000, according to the current statistics of SHELD, and tens of thousands of people were injured. The property losses caused, including the entire city of Sokovia, are estimated to be $50 billion. When Yutong said this, Thor's eating speed slowed down. Kale narrowed his eyes. The price paid in this Battle of Sokovia was indeed extremely heavy, comparable to the previous Battle of New York. The problem was, in the previous Battle of New York, the enemy was aliens, and this time, the Battle of Sokovia was a serious mistake made by their own people. I hope this time, it won't become a psychological burden for Tani. After all, the starting point of his mistake was to protect Earth. Kale thought for a moment and said with certainty, Family Cow will pay the $50 billion to compensate the families of the residents who were killed or injured in this battle. Boss. Yutong wanted to say something but hesitated. Although Family Cow was indeed rich, $50 billion was not a small amount. It was enough to build a second watchtower. Kale understood what she was thinking and smiled. Don't worry. Just treat it as if we bought Sokovia. Understood. Yutong nodded and continued, this time, I'll try again. This time, 26 SHELD agents were injured, and K2 suffered 0 casualties. However, your ride, the Eagle, is gone. According to Natasha, Dr. Bana finally sat in the Eagle that went out of control. I used the watchtower to scan the whole world, and the Eagle is no longer on Earth. It is lost in an unknown outer space area. Chapter 604. Dr. Bana left Earth in an out-of-control Eagle? Kale frowned slightly. This was beyond his expectations, but it seemed to be within reason. The dual personalities of Bana and Hulk should have broken the balance long ago. They would either go to the extreme of destruction or achieve integration and coexistence. Thor put down the bone in his hand and took a big gulp of beer. He, who regarded Bana as a good friend, sighed softly and said, when I return to the divine territory, I'll ask Heimdall to help take a look. I'll see if I can find his whereabouts. Then I'll have to trouble you. Kale nodded lightly and stroked Sakuragi's smooth chin. He pondered and said, although Bana is alone, he can transform into Hulk after all. Even if he's wandering in outer space, he probably won't encounter anything that could endanger his life. It would be good enough if Hulk didn't take the initiative to cause trouble, unless. Kale stopped talking. Unless what? Thor looked at him curiously. Unless the Eagle fighter jet that lost control accidentally flew there. But the universe is so big, there shouldn't be such a coincidence. Kale muttered to himself and shook his head with a smile. The place he was referring to was naturally planet Sokka, which he accidentally intruded into many years ago. At that time, Kale was terminally ill and could only use the Origin Stone to leave Earth after the end of World War II to search for a slim chance of survival in the vast universe. Speaking of which, the Eagle was Supreme Sokka's former vehicle. If the out-of-control Eagle accidentally carried Bana back there, who knew what would happen? After Yutong finished reporting on Sokovia's matters, the door opened. Two figures walked into the main hall from the corridor one after the other. Kyle looked up, and his eyes lit up slightly. It was the twin brother and sister that he had brought back. But now, the two siblings had changed out of their dirty clothes. After bathing and dressing up, they were served by robot servants to change into new clothes prepared by the Lord God. Wanda wore a long crimson dress that reached her calves, showing off her tall and sexy figure. Her slightly curly hair fell lazily on her shoulders. The design of the back of the dress was almost empty, revealing her delicate and charming back. After wearing high heels, she could instantly kill any cover girl. Pierre, on the other hand, was wearing a high-end formal tuxedo. His tall and muscular body was like a hanger to begin with, making the tuxedo suit look just right. After shaving his beard and trimming his silver hair, his original roguish image was now like that of a noble son. However, Quicksilver Pierre was clearly not used to this kind of attire. As he walked into the hall, he twisted his body uncomfortably and kicked his shiny leather shoes on the clean floor, barely managing to keep up with Walter, who was still calm and composed. Kale looked at the two of them and wondered, "It's not a banquet. Why are you dressed like this?" It would have been better if Kale didn't ask, but once he did, Pierre couldn't help but say angrily, "Isn't it because of your artificial intelligence system called the Lord God? It said that if we want to meet you, we have to at least bathe and disinfect, and change into slightly decent formal clothes. We can only do as it says." Thor couldn't help but laugh. He didn't have such requirements. It was obvious that the Lord God treated him differently. He didn't say anything and continued to eat the fried chicken and drink the cold beer. "Is that so?" Kale showed an expression of realization. He looked at Wanda and smiled. "Anyway, that dress suits you very well. Girls should dress like that. Don't fight and kill all day." Wanda snorted proudly. She pulled her brother Pierre and took the initiative to sit on the sofa opposite Kale. She put the thing in her hand on the table. "I'll return this to you first." Kale glanced at it. It was the demon trump card that he had given them earlier. Seeing this, Pierre put his hand into his suit pocket, but hesitation appeared in his eyes. Through card and the Lord God system, he had a rough idea of the use and value of the demon trump card. If there was no direct definition of under one person and above everyone else. As long as one had a demon trump card, they would be able to experience this feeling immediately. Countless people on Earth dreamed of having a demon trump card. "Pierre." Wanda gave him a look. Pierre gritted his teeth and took out the demon cards and put them on the table. Wanda heaved a sigh of relief. She didn't want to owe anyone anything. "Don't be hasty. It's mine. Nobody can take it away. You don't have to return it to me if it's not mine." Kale smiled and looked at the twins. He pondered and said, "After you hear about Lorna, you can decide whether to accept the two cards." "Boss. I'll go first. After all, I was the one who met Lorna first, and I was the one who recommended her to the unnatural firm." Yutong sat down next to Kale and looked at Wanda. She began to talk about how she met Lorna and became friends with her. 10 minutes later. That's it. In the end, Lorna was kidnapped by Thanos' men in the Milky Way star sector. But I can promise you, one day, I'll bring Lorna back, no matter the cost. Kale's tone was firm and certain. When he became serious, a powerful pressure emanated from his body and enveloped the main hall of the watchtower. Everyone inside subconsciously tensed up and felt suffocated. Sorry, I lost my composure. Kale smiled, and the pressure receded like the tide. He and Thanos hadn't really met yet, but they had already clashed several times in the dark. Both sides had their gains and losses. Kale had snatched food from the tiger's mouth and obtained the mind gem and the strength gem. Thanos, on the other hand, had kidnapped Gamora and Lorna, who knew the whereabouts of the soul gem. Both sides were tied for the time being. Wanda and Pierre looked at each other and nodded. Okay, we believe you. However, the two of us have to take action to rescue Lorna as well. No problem. Now, let's talk about the two of you. Kale looked at Wanda and Pierre and said calmly, your identities are a bit special. I don't need to say it. You know it yourselves that you can't walk under the sun. So, while you're officially competing with Thanos, why don't you join the family Cal first? With the identity of K2 as protection, no force on Earth will dare to attack you. You won't have to worry about money and accommodation anymore. You can also use Family Cal's resources to strengthen and arm yourselves. What do you think? Wanda. Pierre's interest was written all over his face. He couldn't hide his excitement as he looked at Wanda next to him. Wanda was silent. She looked down at the demon ace and finally nodded. Okay. But I have a condition. Go ahead. Kale nodded. Wanda tried. Pierre and I will not take orders from Family Cal. Of course. Kale didn't refuse and promised, no one in Family Cal can order you. You can move freely and join the Avengers. Family Cal won't interfere too much. However. Kale narrowed his eyes and looked at Wanda. When you see me in the future, you have to call me Master. This is a rule that family members must abide by. Okay. The superpower twins and Kale reached a consensus. Chapter 605. 3 days later. The aftermath of the Battle of Sokovia swept across the world in the past few days. All the superpowers and the United Nations held many major meetings regarding this battle. News outlets all over the world were constantly discussing this topic, and the people were also in an uproar about it. While superheroes saved the world, their powerful abilities also caused panic among ordinary people. Even S.H.E.L.D. and the Avengers couldn't avoid the storm this time. On the other side. In the vast hinterland of the Pacific Ocean, directly below the watchtower, in the sky next to the aircraft carrier. A city was like a huge floating island. It had an advanced Krypton engine at the bottom, and it was an abandoned city area after the war. The streets, buildings, and transportation were all severely damaged. After many post-war searches, not to mention the living, even the corpses and wreckage of the Steel Legion were cleaned up. Kale, Yutong, and Illusion floated 10,000 meters in the sky, quietly looking down at the city. Boss. This city is seriously damaged, and it's basically uninhabitable. We can only rebuild it brick by brick. Yutong reported softly. Now, even the local refugees of Sokovia didn't dare to live in this city. Don't worry, it's definitely worth $50 billion. Kale looked at Illusion and asked him, how's the brake engine of this city? The basic modification is complete. Illusion nodded and said, the acceleration engine was originally only for one-time use, but after I added various materials and energy, it's now even more stable than the brakes of the aircraft carrier. As long as we invest enough Krypton energy every day, it can make this city float in the air forever. Very good, this is the best location for a territory to build a country. Kale's lips curled up. From the beginning, he only cared about the foundation of this city. As for the residents of Sokovia who didn't dare to come back, as well as the severely damaged buildings and streets, he didn't care at all. Kale thought for a moment and called, Yutong. Boss, go ahead. Yutong blinked. Demolish all the buildings in the city. Abandon the original roads and light rail. Flatten the ground and replace the fragile soil with steel and special materials as filler. Treat the city as a fortress and rebuild the foundation. Then, let Howard use the resources and technology available to Family Cal as a foundation to plan a city of the future. Kale couldn't help but laugh. Howard has retired at home for so long, his hands must be itching. He has the best technology on Earth and has been wandering in the Milky Way alliance for so long. If it's him, he can definitely build an unparalleled city. I understand. Yutong nodded and looked at the abandoned city in front of her, secretly looking forward to its future. At that time, not to mention the original residents of Sokovia, perhaps all the rich and powerful people in the world would want to live here. With you in charge, I can rest assured. Kale smiled and turned to look at Illusion. Illusion, can this city fly out of Earth? The spirit gem on Illusion's forehead flashed. He analyzed. I'm afraid it's not enough with the current brakes. However, I can continue to renovate and form a protective shield around the city. This way, it might be able to fly close to Earth. Very good, let's do that. Kale didn't want to abandon Earth. He just wanted to prepare for a rainy day. No one knew what kind of danger Earth would encounter in the future. If the city could be used as a fortress and battleship to move in space, it could be considered as the last piece of land for humans. Yutong smiled and asked, Boss, is it time for us to announce it to the public? It doesn't matter. Go and arrange it. Kale shrugged. It was just establishing a country, no big deal. Family Cal's current strength could easily destroy a country. Ruling the world wouldn't be difficult. However, this wasn't the old era. It was already good enough that they could protect their own country. Yutong asked curiously, then what's the name of our country? Let's just call it Cal Country. Kale yawned and prepared to go back and take a nap. He stretched and prepared to return to the watchtower. He paused and said, Tell the apprentices all over the world that the time is up. It's time to go home. After saying that, Kale turned into a stream of light and flew toward outer space. Yes. Yutong's eyes lit up. She quickly responded and watched Kale's back as he left. Back then. During World War II, Kale founded Family Cal. With the infinite formula to extend one's youth and super-agent drugs, he created a family force that could lead Earth and fight against alien enemies in the future. Before Kale left Earth, Family Cal had set a family rule. That was to say, Ren Katu could not stay in the family for a long time. When the next batch of Katu was cultivated and reached a certain age, a small number of old Katu would stay as team leaders or coaches. Most of them would choose to go out and establish subordinate families and organizations to spread their influence around the world. Now, almost a century had passed. Family Cal had trained many apprentices and forced some of them to leave. They were all looking forward to the day when family leader Kale came back and led them to create another glorious legend. However, after Kale came back, many things happened on Earth. It was only now that things had calmed down. The day that the apprentices of the family had been dreaming of had finally arrived. At noon on this day, the people of various countries were still discussing the Battle of Sokovia. But then, a new headline began to make headlines. Family Cal had started to build a country. At first, many people didn't know what kind of power Family Cal was. When they finished reading the report and found out that the Unnatural Firm and Stark Industries were one of the companies under Family Cal, and that the leader of Family Cal was Kale, the symbol of peace, the world was instantly shaken. The symbol of peace was going to build a country? The world was going to change. The people who were the most panicked were the higher-ups of the United States. Kale was born in the United States, so he was naturally a citizen of the United States. He had once symbolized the strength and peace of the United States. Now that he was going to build a country, the impact was huge. The people didn't care so much. They started to discuss where Kale would build a country and whether they had the chance to become a citizen. At the same time, the same scene was playing out in every corner of the world. England, Duke Henry's mansion. The granddaughter of the Duke brought along a famous painting by Van Gogh. She wanted to give it to her grandfather as a gift. However, when she arrived at her grandfather's room, she saw that the door was ajar. Through the gap of the door, she could see that the white-haired Duke Henry was sitting on a chair with a normal envelope in his hand. His body was trembling in agitation, and his tears were dripping onto the envelope like rain. The precious painting slipped from his hand. The granddaughter of the Duke didn't care about it. She pushed the door open and entered in fear. "Grandfather, what's wrong?" Duke Henry raised his head and looked at his granddaughter. His face was filled with uncontrollable joy. He repeatedly muttered, "The promised time has arrived. The promised time has arrived." Chapter 606. Vatican City, Polytheist Church. Pope Gerda, who was the highest priest for life, received an urgent letter in the middle of his speech in the main hall of the Vatican. After repeatedly confirming the contents of the letter, Gerda claimed that he had received instructions from God and publicly announced his abdication as the leader of the Pope. On the same day, Gerda took his family and left the Vatican City. No one knew where they went. Few people knew that for the former Pope Gerda, it was really an instruction from God. Russia, 100 meters under the sea prison. In the cage that held the most vicious and serious criminals, a tall and burly figure sat cross-legged in the dark corner of the cage. Several rusty iron chains were tied around his body. "Dragon, your lunch." The fully armed prison guard came to the door of the cage and carefully put a small box of food through the gap in the iron bars. After the prison guard went away, Dragon got up and dragged the iron chain to the iron bars. When he picked up a piece of bread, his face, which had been calm all this time, suddenly furrowed his brows. Dragon took out a piece of bread. Inside the bread, there was an envelope. After he finished reading the letter, he suddenly stood up and pulled on the iron chain with a clanking sound. "This day has finally come. Finally, I found a reason to go out." Dragon muttered to himself. "Nissan, Tokyo. Are you the Wuxia who came for the interview?" In an unknown secret basement, 3 officials in formal attire sat side by side on a chair. Their scrutinizing eyes were focused on the masked man sitting alone on the other side. The masked man was still wearing the black clothes of the previous organization and the Wuxia mask as usual. He crossed 2 swords in their sheaths on his back and looked bored as he sat on the chair and looked at the ceiling. One of the officials flipped through the file and said, "In the file, your real name is Wuxia. Your code name is Wuxia. You have been in 3 assassin organizations and served as a team member and team leader. The most recent organization was Ninja Kill. You are one of the few killers who survived after facing that devil." "No, no, no." Wuxia shook his head and corrected, "I didn't face him. I just missed him twice, so I escaped. But as you can see, the Ninja Kill organization was wiped out, so I have to find another job." One of the officials smiled. "Luck is also a type of strength. What's more, your strength isn't bad. The 3 organizations have obviously recognized your strength, otherwise, they wouldn't have made you a squad leader." Another official added, "But according to the procedure, we still have to see your strength." The third official continued, "You should know that Emperor Nissan is recruiting people this time. If it weren't for the incident last time, there would be a shortage of high combat power personnel. With your 3 job-hopping experiences, it's impossible for you to have the opportunity to come for an interview." "Yes, yes, yes. How should I display it?" Wuxia shrugged helplessly. "Simple." The 3 officials looked at each other. Their hands, which had been under the table, suddenly rose up. Each of them was holding a pistol in their hands. They aimed at the Yikshaws who were 6 meters away and pulled the trigger, shooting randomly. I knew it. Yiksha seemed to have been prepared for this. Almost at the moment the official took out his gun, he pounced forward and reached for the hilt of his saber. The tip of his foot hooked onto the chair he was originally sitting on. As his body flipped forward, the chair flew high towards the interview table. Bang! The chair slammed heavily on the interview table, and a series of bullets rained down on the ground. In the blink of an eye, before the 3 officials had the time to change the magazine, the barrels of their pistols were cut off by a snow-white blade. Then, the cold blade hovered near the necks of the 3 officials. Looking at the 3 officials dripping with cold sweat, Yiksha, who was half lying on the table, narrowed his eyes dangerously. My specialty is killing. Do you want me to continue showing you? No, no. The official shrunk his neck back in embarrassment. You can start work tomorrow. With the highest standard of an assassin, you'll be paid daily. Very good. Yiksha sheathed his sabers and jumped off the table. One of the officials asked in confusion, just now. Those bullets basically blocked the way forward. How did you avoid all of them? What are you talking about? I didn't avoid all of them. I just dodged most of them. Yiksha grinned and turned around to show his back. His thumb pointed to his upper body. There were obviously 3 or 4 bullet holes on his upper body. Blood was still gushing out like a fountain. The 3 officials were shocked speechless. It was the first time they saw an assassin who took the initiative to attack after being hit by 3 or 4 bullets. Can you take off your mask? One of the officials pondered and asked. Yes, I can. But I'm afraid it will scare you. Yiksha looked indifferent. One of the officials comforted him, don't worry. We have received special training and have been on the battlefield many times. We are often in the company of the dead. No matter how horrible it is, we won't be afraid. Since you want to see it so much, then go ahead. Yiksha shrugged and took off his mask, revealing his face that had lost a layer of skin and was full of potholes. This. The 3 officials were silent. They had to admit that they were really frightened. Yiksha's real face was more than 10 times scarier than the Yiksha mask he was wearing. Do you want to have dinner with me again and get to know each other? Yiksha threw a coquettish glance at the officials. The rotten flesh on his face squirmed. The Nissan officials resisted the nausea in their stomachs. Okay, you can go now. But before you go, you'd better put on your mask first. So boring. Yiksha argued. Just as he was about to put on his mask, a cell phone suddenly rang in his pocket. In front of the officials, Yiksha took out his mobile phone and listened to the call. He was silent for a while, then hung up the phone with a solemn face and sighed, it seems that I can't take that job. What do you mean? The 3 officials were stunned. There's no other way. The boss said that I should go back. Yiksha also felt helpless. The boss? Didn't you have no organization? One of the officials had a bad premonition. Who said I don't have one? You just don't know. Yiksha was about to walk to the door, but he remembered that the boss seemed to dislike Nissan, especially the Nissan royal family and the higher-ups. He reached for the sword on his back and turned to the Nissan officials, sorry, 3 of you. The old and new courtiers from all over the world, after receiving the letter, no matter if they were kings, popes, officials, assassins, or leaders of organizations, they all abandoned their current identities without hesitation and brought their families or forces to the promised place back then. The game life was too long. The family Cal finally welcomed the first big gathering. Chapter 607. 3 months later. Since the Battle of Sokovia, another 3 months had passed. Everything was settled, and the world seemed to have returned to its long-lost peace. But whether this was a sign of continued peace or the eve of a storm, no one could say for sure. Under the world, there were still undercurrents surging. During this period of time, Kale officially announced his founding of a country and left the UA. He took the unnatural firm and completely withdrew from New York City, leaving only an empty shell building to maintain affairs. No one knew where his country was built or where it would go. The Avengers had new members, namely Scarlet Witch Wanda, Quicksilver Pierre, and Vision Ultron. Their overall combat power had leaped, and their crime fighting had become more efficient and effective. So far, the members of the Avengers had reached double digits. The permanent members were UA Captain Steve, Iron Man Tony, Black Widow Natasha, Hawkeye Clinton, Falcon Sam, including the newly added twins and Vision. Members who appeared and left from time to time included Poison Agent Eddie and Thor, as well as members who went missing such as Superman Caesar and Hulk, as well as the symbol of peace, Kale, who was a special existence in name. But an unavoidable pressure was coming to the Avengers. Stark Industries, World Expo. Tony, who seemed to have walked out of the shadow of the failure of Ultron, wore a bright and beautiful suit and stood alone on the podium. In front of thousands of famous university students below the podium, he explained the scientific product that transcended the century. The second structure was the technology researched and invented by the mysterious guest. After the mysterious guest died, the patent of this technology returned to Stark Industries. After explaining the second structure, Tony announced on the stage that he would establish a new fund and invest a lot of money to encourage society to create and invent future technologies. The announcement of this important news immediately caused an uproar in the audience, and the cheers of the audience did not stop. At the end, Tony stood under the spotlight and looked at the boiling audience below. He blurted out, "For the future, don't be afraid of failure." After he finished speaking, Tony left the podium in a slightly embarrassed manner, although he looked handsome and dashing. Yes, he inspired the world to not be afraid of failure and to face the future, but he was still timid from his last failure. Countless nights, he still blamed himself for the mistakes he made. A mistake that indirectly led to the death of more than 1,000 human beings. Tony ran away. He didn't wear his Iron Man suit and left the podium alone. He got rid of the reporters and came to the quiet backstage in the dead of night. As soon as Tony arrived at the elevator door, a woman who had been waiting for a long time, looked at him blankly. "I've been waiting for you, Mr. Stark." "You are?" Tony looked at her in surprise. "I'm no one, just a mother." The woman took out the tablet from her bag as she spoke. The screen was still on, and the cover was a sunny young man in his prime. "That's my son, Danny. He's only 22 years old. 3 months ago, he was doing an internship in Sokovia. Remember, you killed him." Danny's mother told him the truth indifferently and turned to leave. Tony looked at the back of Danny's mother and then at Danny on the tablet. He fell into a long silence and self-blame. In the lobby on the top floor of the restored Avengers building, Steve, Natasha, Sam, Illusion, Wanda, and Pierre in casual clothes sat on the sofa in the lobby, watching the news on the TV. In the news, the current king of Wakanda, T'Chaka, as the representative of the United Nations, publicly questioned the actions of the Avengers. "I dare say that the Battle of Sokovia was not the beginning of their reckless actions. It was just the last straw that broke the camel's back. This cruel internal battle has completely exposed the dark side of the Avengers. They claim that they want to stop criminals, but they are unscrupulous and carry out unruly actions." In front of the camera and the microphone, T'Chaka's aged face was full of seriousness. He said righteously, "Look carefully at the threat and destruction they cause to the world. They're not much worse than those criminals. Those who call themselves superheroes, their actions are above international law, sacrificing innocent people to win." Steve picked up the remote control and turned off the TV. No one in the lobby spoke. Everyone was apologetic. Steve glanced at everyone and said in a deep voice, "Everyone. I know that this is what we have to go through. If it's not now, it will be in the future. We will be questioned by the world. The others remained silent. They didn't know what to say. If we can't stand firm in our beliefs, we will definitely fall apart. Steve frowned and said in surprise, "Where's Clinton? Why haven't I seen him recently?" Natasha replied, "Hawkeye said he was tired and wanted to spend more time taking care of his wife and children. He won't be coming over for a while. As for the future, I don't know." "Yeah. Why are we doing this now?" Sam lowered his head and smiled bitterly. The Avengers were an illegal organization. They were a group of talented people who stepped forward to protect the world and were willing to fight until the end. Unfortunately, even the world wasn't on their side now. The world rejected and questioned their actions. If they continued to fight alone, they would lose the reputation and praise that they originally deserved. "If any of you want to quit and leave, I won't stop you, but I'll stay until the end. I want to continue fighting. Kale should think the same." Steve was firm. He had experienced too many battles and knew what was most important. "Captain." Natasha reminded softly, "Tonight, the Secretary of State will come over to discuss with us the Avengers." "Okay. I got it." Steve thought for a moment and said, "Call Tawny back. After all, the Avengers are his blood and sweat. No matter what we face, no matter what choice we make, he should be there." "Okay, I'll contact him later." Natasha nodded and looked at the twins. "You two haven't been back to Family Cal in 3 months, right?" Wanda and Pierre looked at each other and shook their heads. "In fact, we have temporarily lost contact with Family Cal. They seem to be remodeling the base. I don't know the details." Illusion, who was pouring coffee, felt his heart skip a beat. When he saw that no one asked him, he secretly sighed in relief. If what Family Cal was planning was made public, it would definitely shock everyone. However, Family Head Kale had given a strict order to seal off all information. Chapter 608. At night. At the top floor of the Avengers building. At noon, Steve and the others were still there. However, Tawny and the Secretary of State were also there. "Tell me, why did you call me back so suddenly?" Tawny was wearing a dark t-shirt. He leaned against the desk and scanned the people sitting in the hall. Steve and the others looked at the Secretary of State. "Is the situation not clear enough?" The Secretary of State was an old man with white hair. He sighed softly and said, "I know that you have saved the world many times. You have fought continuously to fight against crime. However, compared to superheroes, the people prefer to call you vigilantes." Natasha was not convinced and retorted, "Mr. Secretary of State. The term vigilante comes out of your mouth. Do you dare to use this term to describe Kyle? That's different." The Secretary of State avoided the topic. In any case, this golden age was fought by Kale. The achievements of the symbol of peace were not something he could talk about. In other words, in this world, no one dared to stand in front of Kale and question his actions. However, the Avengers were different. "Think about it." The Secretary of State said in a deep voice, "A group of superhumans living in the United States often ignore national borders, local police, and laws. Their actions are completely reckless. Now, the governments of the world can no longer tolerate this situation." At this point, the Secretary of State turned on his phone and pressed the play button. In the video, there were clips of Hulk rampaging through the streets, Thor using lightning to bombard the top of the tower, Iron Man and Ultron fighting, and Scarlet Witch blowing up the building with a bomb. Beside them, countless ordinary people screamed and fled. They were affected by the battle between superhumans. They were all flesh and blood. If they were affected by the battle, they would either die or be injured. The Battle of New York, the Battle of the Aircraft Carrier, the Battle of Washington, the Battle of Sokovia, and so on. You all remember these, right? The Secretary of State put away his phone. Seeing that the heroes in the main hall were silent, he calmed down and took out a document from the inside of his suit. Of course, there is a solution. This is the Sokovia Agreement. Led by Wakanda, there were 117 countries that supported the agreement. All countries have the right to participate in the monitoring. Supers cannot act in private, or they will be sanctioned by more than 100 countries. Only when everyone signs this agreement can you, the Avengers, continue to live in harmony with the world and move towards the future. The Secretary of State's decisive words served as a conclusion. He left the Sokovia Agreement behind and left the top floor alone. Everyone in the hall was silent for a long time. Then, Tani was the first to break the silence. He shrugged indifferently, picked up the agreement and flipped through it. Then, he immediately took out a pen from his pocket. Tani. Steve wanted to stop him. That young man, no, many young men died because of my miscalculation, unable to walk towards the future that belonged to them. Tani was expressionless as he signed his name on the agreement. I think this is pretty good. It's more standardized and legal. This isn't the original you. Tani, you're scared. You're scared that you'll make another mistake for the future. Steve looked disappointed. He got up from the sofa and left the hall. I won't sign it. I believe Kale won't either. Tani put down the agreement, looked at the night sky outside the window, and whispered to himself, because Godfather won't make a mistake, but we will. Tonight, an irreparable crack appeared in the team of the Avengers. However, the night was not over yet. New York, 6th floor of the Council Building. The current king of Wakanda, T'Chaka, as the representative of the United Nations, had his back to the spacious floor-to-ceiling window. He faced many reporters and gave a speech on the podium. While criticizing the actions of the Avengers, he also explained the importance of the Sokovia Agreement. At the front of the podium, a black young man wearing a leopard tooth necklace, Prince T'Challa of Wakanda, was looking at his father with a smile. Suddenly, T'Challa had an extremely bad premonition. This was the sharp intuition of the wild in his body. It was as if he was about to lose the most important person. But the most important person was standing in front of him at this moment. T'Challa's eyes widened. In his violently contracted pupils, a black object shot out from the floor-to-ceiling window behind his father's podium. No! T'Challa screamed in despair. He sped up and rushed toward his father on the podium. But he was still a step too late. The object hit the floor-to-ceiling window and instantly exploded into a burst of flames. Boom! The flames of the rocket explosion bloomed in the night of New York. The floor-to-ceiling windows on the 6th floor of the building shattered. The explosion continued to sweep and covered T'Chaka on the podium. T'Challa, who was in the air, was directly slapped back by the explosion. The reporters in the room were in a mess, screaming again and again. Terrorist attack. And it was an attack against the king of Wakanda. In the billowing smoke in the room, T'Chaka crawled on the floor. He ignored the ringing in his ears and forced himself to crawl to his father's side. At this time, his father had already fallen in a pool of blood and stopped breathing. He looked out of the window with bloodshot eyes. Among the panicked passers-by, he just happened to see a man with disheveled hair and a mechanical left hand riding a motorcycle and leaving. I'll definitely kill you. Definitely. T'Chaka gritted his teeth, anger burning in his chest like a flame. Steve, who had just returned home, had yet to take a shower when his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that it was Natasha calling. What's up? Steve picked up the phone. For Natasha to call at this time, it must be something urgent. Natasha quickly said, Captain. The King of Wakanda just died in a terrorist attack at the diplomatic building in New York. Your old acquaintance seems to have appeared at the scene. He's a major suspect. Baki? I got it. Steve took a deep breath. Since the battle on the aircraft carrier, Baki had disappeared. Now that he suddenly appeared in New York and was a suspect in killing the king of Wakanda, the situation was not optimistic. No matter what, he had to find Baki and ask him clearly. Steve quickly changed into his American uniform and put on the vibrating gold round shield. He also asked Natasha to keep in touch and inform him of the latest information at any time. If the police were one step ahead of him, everything would be irreparable. What Steve didn't know was that after Natasha told him, she hesitated for a moment before dialing the family cow's emergency number. In the current dangerous situation, if Captain America stood on the suspect's side, then the barely maintained situation would completely collapse. Only that man could save them from this hopeless situation. Chapter 609. New York, Bronx, around 10:00 at night. In a rental building on the side of a busy street, in a single room on the 20th floor. Captain America Steve, wearing his exclusive uniform and a vibranium shield in his left hand, was the first to arrive at the suspected hiding place of Winter Soldier Baki with the information given by Natasha. Captain, a large number of American Special Forces are heading towards you. They will arrive in about a minute. From the headset he was wearing, Sam the Falcon, who was on the lookout outside, transmitted a message. Got it. Continue to observe. Steve replied. He locked the door and scanned the room he had broken into. The curtains were drawn, and under the dim ceiling light, the interior was very messy. A faint smell of smoke lingered in the air. There was someone here. Just as this thought appeared in Steve's mind, the door suddenly opened, and a man with disheveled hair walked out. It was Baki, his comrade he knew. At this time, Baki was wearing a jacket that covered his mechanical left arm. He looked at Steve expressionlessly, not at all surprised by his appearance. Baki, it's really you. Seeing an old friend again, Steve took a deep breath and asked, how long have you been hiding in New York? It's been about 3 months. Why didn't you contact me? Why should I contact you? Baki turned his face away and asked, don't forget your position. You and I are on opposite sides. You are a hero, and I am a criminal. Steve frowned, stepped forward, and looked at Baki. Then the person who attacked the king of Wakanda, Baki calmly looked up and met Steve's eyes. It wasn't me. I just happened to pass by. Do you believe me? Steve nodded and said in a low voice, I believe you. But you are now the prime suspect. The police and special forces in the city want to arrest you. You are now in a very dangerous situation. Then you shouldn't have come here. Baki glanced at the door and window. He had already noticed that many people were quietly approaching the room. They should be the American military. Baki. Let me ask you one last question. Why did you save me when we were on the aircraft carrier? Steve stared straight at Baki's face, trying to verify the guess he had in his heart. Perhaps now Baki has independently gotten rid of the control of the Hydra organization, but he is afraid of relapsing again and hurting others, so he would rather bear everything alone. I don't know. As soon as Baki finished speaking, the doors and windows of the room they were in were forcefully broken through. Then, a high-explosive grenade was thrown into the room. Baki's reaction was extremely fast. He kicked the high-explosive grenade towards Steve. Steve flipped his shield and placed the grenade on the floor, isolating it from the impact of the explosion. Although the two of them hadn't worked together for 70 years, their tacit understanding was as good as one. Their movements and coordination were as smooth as flowing water. Bang! Outside the broken door and window of the room, the heavily armed American Special Forces broke in. Baki and Steve immediately fought back. Both of them were veterans who had experienced World War II. Their physical fitness and combat skills were better than ordinary people. A small team of special forces was beaten to a pulp. Seeing Baki use his mechanical left hand to throw a special forces soldier to the ground like a chicken and raise his left fist again, Steve couldn't help but shout, "Don't kill him." "I won't kill anyone," Baki responded coldly. His mechanical left fist deflected the head of the special forces soldier on the ground. It pierced through the wooden floor and took out the backpack hidden at the bottom. Baki first threw the backpack through the window to the roof of the opposite building. Then, he broke through the stairs alone. Steve could only follow his footsteps. Even if he knew that this would stain his reputation and make him guilty, he had to follow his own will to defeat the special forces soldiers surrounding the building and help Baki retreat. With Steve's help from behind, Baki first got rid of the special forces soldiers and jumped to the roof of the opposite building. However, just as he picked up the backpack, a swift black shadow slammed into him fiercely. Baki was immediately knocked a few meters away. His mechanical left hand supported him on the ground. He looked up and saw that the black shadow was a humanoid Black Panther. To be more precise, it was a mysterious person wearing a Black Panther suit. The Black Panther looked at Baki coldly. It raised both hands and sharp nails extended from the tips of its fingers. It was about to continue attacking Baki. At this moment, Captain America, Steve, jumped down and blocked its attack. "Don't block me." The Black Panther's tone was filled with anger. Its left hand clawed at Steve. Steve raised his shield in time to defend. The vibrating gold round shield, which could be said to be the strongest defense, left 5 shallow claw marks under the Black Panther's sharp claws. This was the vibrating gold round shield. If it were a human body, the skin would have been torn open. Even the strengthened physique would not be effective. Those claws were made of vibrating gold. Steve was shocked to the core. At the same time, Baki took the opportunity to jump down the building first. The Black Panther did not tangle with Steve too much. It continued to chase after Baki. Steve followed closely behind. In the tunnel under the viaduct, countless cars with headlights on were honking their horns, and it was a mess. Among them, Winter Soldier, Black Panther, and Captain America were chasing each other against the dense traffic, causing constant car accidents and turbulence. Dong Bing wanted to escape, the Black Panther wanted to avenge his father, and Steve wanted to cover Dong Bing's escape. The three of them chased each other in the tunnel, launching a superpower battle. Finally, the three of them stopped at the exit of the tunnel. It was not that any of them had stopped, but that the police and military forces of the United States had arrived and sealed off the area. Countless police cars with sirens surrounded Dong Bing and the other two. There were more than a dozen military helicopters flying in the sky, and several glaring spotlights shone on them. "Put your hands up." The war machine in iron armor, Colonel Road, flew to the ground, opened the cannon with both hands, and aimed at Dong Bing and the other two. He looked at Dong Bing and the Black Panther, and his eyes fell on Steve. "Captain, you are a criminal." Baki and Steve were silent. They no longer resisted and raised their hands in surrender. The Black Panther retracted its claws and took off its helmet, revealing a dark and firm face. It was T'Challa. "Oh, Your Majesty." Road showed a look of realization. T'Challa, who was originally a prince, naturally became the nominal king after the death of the king. Seeing that Dong Bing and the other two did not resist, Road sighed lightly and ordered the police next to him, "Okay, handcuff them." "Wait, ordinary handcuffs are useless against the three of them. We need to use special props." "Yes." The dozen or so police officers were about to step forward when suddenly, a spark appeared on the road. Then, the spark spun into a wheel, and a tall and majestic figure stepped out from it. It was a young and handsome silver-haired youth, dressed casually and ordinary. But when he appeared on the scene, not only the police and military personnel around, but even Road and Dong Bing were moved. "I say, you guys really know how to cause trouble." Kale looked at Steve, Baki, and T'Challa and smiled. Whenever he was not in New York, something always happened in New York. If he had not arrived in time this time, perhaps the unnecessary civil war would have really happened. Chapter 6:10. The military helicopter hovered in the air, and the dazzling spotlights illuminated the road area. After Kyle appeared, the soldiers and police officers who surrounded the scene and aimed their guns at Dong Bing and the others subconsciously put down their guns without listening to orders. They dared to threaten Dong Bing, Captain America, and even the King of Wakanda with their guns, but they didn't dare to point their guns at Kale. After all, the consequences related to it had already been written in the history books. General Kale. Rhodes took off his steel helmet and took the initiative to salute Kale. The soldiers and policemen behind him saluted in unison. The originally tense atmosphere was immediately reversed by one person's aura. Kale waved his hand and reminded, "I'm not a general anymore, and I'm not a citizen of the United States anymore." Rhodes said sincerely, "In my heart, you will always be the greatest general in history." In that case. Kale shrugged and pointed at Dong Bing and the others. "Then give me face. I'll take the three of them away now. Is that okay?" As soon as this sentence came out, Baki, Chara, and Steve were stunned. Rhodes' tanned face showed a difficult expression. He hesitated and said, "General Kale, if it's anything else, I'll definitely agree. But now this matter is very big. Not only the United States, but countries all over the world are paying attention to the aftermath of this matter. So, my face doesn't work?" Kale was expressionless. A powerful pressure spread out, forcing the soldiers and policemen to take a few steps back. "General Kale, please wait a moment. This matter is very important. It's not something I can decide. I need to make a few phone calls." Rhodes was a little embarrassed. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He shrank back and put on the steel helmet that was connected to the radio again. "Go ahead." Kale nodded. Rhodes took a few steps back and made a satellite phone call with his back facing them. Steve relaxed, looked at Kale and asked, "Kale, why are you here?" Kale looked at him unhappily and said, "Half an hour ago. Natasha called me and said that Baki was involved. She didn't know what you would do." "Thanks." Steve lowered his head. He knew that he had acted rashly today, unlike his usual calm and wise self, but he didn't regret it at all. In his opinion, heroes had to follow their hearts freely. They had to believe and insist that what they were doing was right. Even if they were going against the world, even if they only had the support of a few people, only then could they truly lend a helping hand to justice. Captain America Steve pursues freedom and heroism, while Iron Man Tony has compromised with the world because of what happened some time ago. This is also the current split view of the Avengers. "Kale." Baki looked at Kale and called out softly. "Looks like you've almost recovered," Kale said in surprise. "Not really." Baki shook his head and stopped talking. "Mr. Kale." T'Challa summoned up his courage, clenched his fists, and questioned Kale's approach. "You're highly respected. You shouldn't get involved in this matter." He glanced at Baki and continued, "He killed my father. He must be punished by the law. Captain America sheltered him to escape, so he must also be punished by the law. T'Challa, right?" Kale pondered and asked him, "Is your current private action, chasing the suspect on the road regardless of the car, also within the scope of the law?" T'Challa was suddenly speechless. Indeed, his current personal action was considered a violation of the local law and order. Kale said meaningfully, "Let's talk about it again. You said that Baki killed your father. Did you see Baki do it with your own eyes?" T'Challa was about to open his mouth, but soon stopped, his pupils contracted slightly. "Right, he indeed didn't see Baki do it. He only saw Baki appear at the scene, and then connected with Baki's identity and crime, he tacitly agreed that the other party was the one who killed his father. "I didn't kill your father," Baki said hoarsely. T'Challa's brows tightened. After a moment of silence, he stared at Kale and said, "You said that because you know the two of them. That's why you're standing on their side." Kale smiled. "It seems that your father didn't mention me to you." You know my father?" T'Challa's eyes widened in disbelief. How come he hadn't heard of it? Not only that. Kale pondered. "Is there a door in the basement of your country's palace?" "Door?" T'Challa was stunned. He quickly recalled. Indeed, there was a door in the basement of the Wakanda palace that had been sealed for a long time. Every time he asked, his father would fall into reminiscence and talk about the story behind the door. "It's normal that you don't know. After all, that door hasn't been used for decades." Kale smiled indifferently. The family's headquarters used to have a portal that connected to Wakanda. However, after Kale, Howard, and Logan left Earth one after another, Wakanda gradually lost contact with the family's headquarters. You're the owner of that door, my father's master." T'Challa looked at Kale excitedly. His childhood memories came back bit by bit. When his father taught him combat skills, he mentioned the story of the door and his master, but he didn't mention his identity and name. "Master. I guess so. But Logan taught him a little more." Kale patted T'Challa and said softly, "I'm very sorry about Chaka's misfortune. However, don't be manipulated by hatred. The one who killed your father might be someone else." T'Challa looked at Baki and then at Kale. He nodded and said, "All right. Since you said so, I'll definitely investigate it clearly. Follow me to a place later. I'll tell you the truth." When Kale said this, Rode finally finished his call. He turned around and said to the four, "You can go now." Rode made 3 calls in succession. One was to a high-ranking military general, one was to the Secretary of State, and the last one was to the President of the United States. The 3 people's replies were the same: let them go. Although they were helpless, they could only let them go as a sign of respect for the symbol of peace. The 3 big shots who usually had different opinions due to various matters reached an agreement in a short period of time in the face of the symbol of peace. "Then let's go." Kale looked as if he had already guessed it. He raised his hand with the ring on it and drew a circle with his right hand. Sparks spun and formed a portal. Kale took the lead and stepped into the portal. Steve nodded at Baki and followed closely behind. After Baki followed, T'Challa was the last to step into the portal. The 4 people left through the portal. The portal gradually shrank until the sparks completely dimmed and extinguished. Rode looked at the confused soldiers and policemen around him, as well as the messy traffic on the road. He lamented bitterly, "All that's left is a mess," on the other side of the portal. When Kale brought Dong Bing and the other 2 here, Steve, Baki, and even the Wakandan-born T'Challa opened their eyes wide and looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. Chapter 6:11. This is, Steve and the other 2 looked around in shock and found that they were in the sky above a city, suspended in a green garden 100 meters above the ground. They stood in the sky garden and looked down. Under the golden sunlight, ultramodern, warship-like high-rise buildings stood in the city like a steel forest, and a strong sense of the future hit them in the face. "Sir, times have changed." This was the intuitive feeling of Steve and the other 2. This bustling city seemed to be an era ahead of Earth's civilization. Floating cars could be seen everywhere in the city. Floating cars shuttled back and forth in the sky above the city in an orderly manner, and some huge 3D virtual screens were directly projected in the sky. They looked up at the edge of the city and could see the vast clouds and the sea at the bottom. Even the city below was suspended in the sky. "Kale, are we still on Earth?" Steve calmed down and looked at Kale. Baki's mouth was wide open, and he was also puzzled. T'Challa even subconsciously compared the current city to his country, Wakanda. In terms of technology and products extended by vibranium, Wakanda was naturally unmatched, but some general technology, such as anti-gravity, two-component projection, and so on, were obviously more mature and advanced than Wakanda. Of course, this is Earth. Kale smiled indifferently and opened his hands toward the city below. Welcome to Cal Country, my country. He winked at Steve and said, this is not only on Earth. How long has it been? You should be very familiar with this place. Very familiar? Steve looked at Kale doubtfully, and his gaze fell back on the shocking city of the future. Soon, as if he had noticed something, Steve's eyes widened, and he stuttered, no way. This is Sokovia? How is this possible? Baki and T'Challa were shocked. Sokovia had been turned into a pile of ruins in the cruel battle 3 months ago. In just 3 months, it had turned into a city of the future that was ahead of any other city on Earth. This was simply a miracle. Of course it's possible. Kale smiled without saying anything. With the wealth and energy resources that could rival a country, the connections and manpower of the family Cal, the engineers who mastered the technological civilization of Earth and the galaxy, and the Phantom that could transform and modify mechanical structures at will, when all these factors were combined into one, building a futuristic city within 3 months was just a matter of time. Impressive. Steve sighed in amazement and reminisced. He smiled and said, the floating city, the floating garden, and the floating car. These anti-gravity technology products must have Mr. Howard's credit behind them. After all, during World War II, Howard had already demonstrated anti-gravity technology to the world at the World Expo. It was just that the technology was not perfect at that time and could only make the car float for a few seconds, which made the audience laugh. Howard was the chief engineer who designed this city. Kale did not hide the truth. Since the city was floating in the air, the houses and vehicles inside could not be left behind. They also had to use anti-gravity devices. These were Howard's exact words. T'Challa sniffed the air and said in surprise, is it my imagination? The air here is very fresh. It doesn't feel like we're 10,000 meters up in the air at all. At 10,000 meters up in the air, the oxygen was already thin. It was impossible to maintain such a natural and fresh air. Because the energy here is all krypton and electricity, there is no secondary pollution. Kale pointed to the top and explained, and this city is surrounded by a layer of energy shield, isolating it from the outside world. The energy shield can simulate the weather, purify the circulating air, and act as the country's first line of defense. The gravity here is also a bit strange. Baki, who had been silent, tried to jump. In the end, he jumped 2 to 3 meters with a light jump. The gravity of every part of this city can be set by the system. The gravity of the residential area and the floating garden is set to 0. 75 times that of Earth's gravity. This kind of environment is the most comfortable for ordinary people. Of course, for us, it doesn't make much of a difference. Kale shrugged. He had gotten used to 10 times the gravity a long time ago. Let's go. I'll bring you guys down to take a look. Just jump down with me. Kale walked to the edge of the floating garden and jumped down toward the road 100 meters below. Steve and the other two looked at each other. They were also very brave. They all jumped down with Kale. The 4 of them freely fell down 100 meters. Steve was planning to use the vibrating gold round shield to offset the impact of the fall. However, when they were about 2 meters from the ground, a gentle cushioning force was released from the road and brought them safely to the ground. It was a superhumanized anti-suicide device. This was also designed by Howard. He was very obsessed with anti-gravity technology. Anti-gravity devices could be seen everywhere. It was also a way to fulfill his desire when he was young. Slap. Kale, who was standing at the side of the road, snapped his fingers. A hovering car immediately stopped in front of them. Unmanned. Seeing that there was not even a driver inside and that it was an empty hovering car, Steve let out a light breath. In a short time, he had received too much information. He was already used to this city. The hovering car shot out a green light and scanned Kale and the other three to confirm their identities. Identity confirmed. Welcome back, King Kale. Welcome, Captain America, Steve Rogers, Winter Soldier Bucky, and King Chara of Wakanda. Let's go to the palace. Kale took the three of them into the hovering car. The car slowly started and rose up. It sped through the buildings. Seeing Steve and the other two looking at the city through the window, Kale said softly, "You are the registered entrance of the Lord God. Therefore, you are recognized by this city. You can freely enter and leave the city and live there forever. Through points and Skynet rewards, you can enjoy all the intelligent measures inside, such as transportation, food, energy, accommodation, education, simulation training ground, and so on." Points? Skynet rewards? Simulation training ground? Steve and the other two stared at each other. They did not understand these new terms at all. This time, Kale did not need to explain. Inside the hovering car, the car's built-in system answered. Points. Originally, within the family Cal, the family contribution points accumulated by K2 can be exchanged for family resources. Now, it is spread throughout the Cal country. Instead of cash, as long as you have enough points, you can exchange for any item in the Cal country. Now that almost everyone in the country was a member of the family Cal, it was natural that points were spread throughout the country. Skynet rewards. On the virtual platform facing the world, Skynet, players can obtain special rewards by challenging special game levels. Through the rewards, they can exchange for points, one-day Cal country travel cards, and even permanent entry. This could be considered as selecting suitable elites and talents from the outside world to replenish the fresh blood of the Cal country. Skynet now covered the whole world. The player base was as high as 1 billion. In this virtual space, some levels could be used to test the potential of the players, and an appropriate olive branch would be extended. Simulation training ground. There is a gravity field inside, simulated battle space, dual exchange platform. Chapter 6:12. Steve and the other two did not fully understand. Naturally, they would not be able to understand everything in such a short time. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that Kale was using the Cal country to play a huge game of chess, enough to affect and change the current world. When the countries outside united and prepared to rely on the Sokovia Agreement to restrict the actions of supers, the Cal country did the opposite. Not only did it encourage its citizens to improve their combat strength and evolve to obtain supers, but it also extended an olive branch to the humans with potential in the outside world. In fact, Kale had wanted Earth to adapt to supers a long time ago, so that humans could collectively walk the path of evolution, not just the special heroes like the Avengers. However, as the saying went, more haste, less speed. In the past few years, Kale had not been able to change the humans on Earth through propaganda and unnatural practices. A large part of the reason was that the resources and time were not ripe. Thus, Kale took advantage of the fact that he had created his own country and allowed supers to be used freely in the entire Cal country. He used the Skynet card, points, and various other measures and benefits to quickly improve the overall evolution level of the Cal country. Then, he stimulated and activated the entire Earth through the Cal country. In the country that he had created, there were not so many rules and regulations. As long as Kale wanted to do something, he could do it at will. Changing the law was just a matter of words from him. Under the orders given by Kale, the hovering car passed through half of the city, gathered with many other hovering cars, and floated 300 meters above the ground. It was shaped like a sword-shaped fortress that pointed to the sky. That was the symbol of power, the sword-shaped palace city. On the smooth and huge square of the castle, many Cal residents arrived by hovering car. There were portals that led to the Sky Garden, Skynet platform, training grounds, and even the outside world. In the center of the square, there was a huge virtual screen. The residents came here from time to time to exchange for resources and items through points. When Kale appeared in the central square, the residents immediately knelt down and quickly opened a path. Kale led Steve and the other two to the virtual screen without any obstructions. There were all kinds of exchange items on it. From the super agent drug that could break through the limits of the human body, to the infinite formula drug that could prolong one's life and youth, as well as the hardest and rarest vibrating gold metal on Earth, there were all kinds of priceless items. We can exchange for these resources? Chala was dumbfounded. He asked, a little moved. Before Kale could answer, a beautiful figure suddenly descended from the sky and landed beside Kale. She replied softly, "That's right. As long as you come here, you can use your points to exchange for the items on the screen, but the required points are different." Yu Tong. Kale nodded at the newcomer. "Boss. I thought that you would directly open the door to the palace." Yu Tong winked playfully. Taking advantage of the fact that no one else was around, she gently hugged Kale's left hand with both hands. Chara asked curiously, "Then how do we obtain points?" Yu Tong replied, "It's the simplest way." It was to use the currency circulating in the outside world to exchange for points. However, the exchange rate for points was relatively low. It's best if it's a valuable item, such as other resources. Kale smiled indifferently. As long as it was a valuable item, no matter what it was, he could use it as a sacrificial card draw material to draw a new round of cards. Therefore, he was not worried about exchanging for something of little value. Yu Tong maintained her smile and teased, for example, Steve's vibrating gold round shield and Baki's mechanical left hand. These are all very valuable items that can be exchanged for a large number of points. Steve, Baki, was she serious? She wanted to replace their vibrating gold round shield and mechanical left hand? Why not just take their lives? Kale secretly smiled. At that moment, the two of them did not know that if it wasn't for his existence that interfered with the direction of this world. Perhaps by now, Steve would have lost his vibrating gold round shield and Baki would have lost his mechanical left hand. Resources and valuable items can be exchanged for points. Chala was eager to try. There was a large amount of vibrating gold in Wakanda, and the currency of wealth was just a number. There are other channels, such as the Dual Arena, Skynet, missions issued by the Cal country, and so on. You three can pay attention to them in the future. Yu Tong did not forget to promote the Cal country. Kale coughed and said in a deep voice, "Okay. Yu Tong, let's get back to the topic." "Okay." Yu Tong nodded and looked sideways at Steve and the other two. She raised her hand in the direction of the palace. "Dear guests. Let's have a seat in the palace. I will slowly explain the truth behind the attack on the Wakanda king." Cal country, main hall of the palace. When Kale and the others sat down on the sofa, Sakura brewed a cup of flower tea for Chala to calm down. Yu Tong sat next to Kale and said softly, after receiving Natasha's call, "Boss asked me to investigate the Wakanda king. Through the watchtower, I obtained a satellite video of the street outside the New York Foreign Affairs building when the Wakanda king was attacked." Baki was as indifferent as ever. Steve's expression did not change. He believed that if Baki said he did not do it, then it was naturally not him. Chala clenched his fists and waited anxiously for Yu Tong's response. "Lord God, show them the video." As soon as Yu Tong gave the order, a virtual screen appeared in the hall. Although the video on the screen was a little blurry, Steve and the others could still see that it was the street outside the Foreign Affairs building. Before the attack on the Wakanda king began, the busy street was bustling with people. At this moment, Baki, wearing sunglasses and a jacket, appeared. He stopped his motorcycle by the roadside and took an envelope from the mailbox. At the same time, a young man wearing a baseball cap appeared in the alley of the street. While the passers-by were not paying attention, he put his backpack on the ground and unzipped it, revealing a black muzzle that was aimed at the Foreign Affairs building across the street. Then, a rocket launcher was launched and hit the 6th floor of the Foreign Affairs building. Taking advantage of the chaos, the young man in the baseball cap quickly zipped up, carried his backpack, and left with his head down. Baki stuffed the envelope into his pocket and calmly got on his motorcycle and left. The satellite video ended there. T'Challa was silent. This video completely cleared Baki of suspicion. It was really someone else who killed his father. Steve looked at Baki and asked curiously, "Baki, why did you appear there at that time?" Baki said truthfully, "At that time, someone sent me a letter with some of the words Hydra had used to brainwash me. He asked me to go to the mailbox in front of the Foreign Affairs building at that time and pick up an envelope. So you went? As expected of you." Kale didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No matter how he looked at it, it looked like a well-designed trap. "Who's the young man in the video?" "Yutong, did you find out?" Kale asked. "Of course." Yutong smiled and nodded. She clapped her hands, and the information panel with the young man's photo popped up. "His name is Helmut Zemo, a survivor of Sokovia. His parents died in the Battle of Sokovia. He attacked the Wakanda king and framed Baki. His purpose is very clear. It's to make Captain America commit a crime and then cause conflict and division among the Avengers." Chapter 613. The truth had been revealed. After knowing the real murderer of his father, T'Challa requested to return to the outside world. Kale did not ask him to stay. He immediately drew circles and opened the portal to New York. T'Challa was like an injured beast. He bent slightly and stepped through the portal, leaving the main hall of the Cal Country's palace alone. "As for the two of you, you should stay here and lie low for the time being." Kale waved his hand and closed the portal. He looked at Steve and Baki who were sitting on the opposite sofa. He sighed softly and said, "The three of us can be considered old friends reunited." The three of them had fought side by side during World War II. After going around in circles for nearly a century, they finally got together again. Yes. Steve also had mixed feelings. He looked at Baki who remained silent and asked in confusion, "Baki, why are you unwilling to come back to us?" Baki opened his mouth. He lowered his head and hesitated. Finally, he said, "The sins on my body are too heavy. It's not suitable for me to stand together with Captain America and the symbol of peace." Steve patted his shoulder and said in a deep voice, "Baki, you have known the two of us for almost 80 years. Are Kale and I people who care about what the outside world thinks?" Kale nodded in agreement. "We are all the same. We are people who overturn the outside world's view with our own strength. A hero whose heart was changed by the outside world's misconceptions could no longer be called a hero. He could only be considered a qualified warrior." "But..." Baki still looked troubled. He pointed to his temple and said in pain, "When I sleep at night, the people I killed flashed through my mind from time to time. When I see those words of command, my heart still trembles. I don't know if I will lose control again and become a winter soldier controlled by others." "Baki." Steve used a little strength with his left hand to stabilize Baki's trembling shoulders. Kale and Yutong looked at each other and then said indifferently, "Baki, your problem is not a problem now." "Huh?" Baki and Steve were both stunned. How could it not be a problem? Brainwashing and memory disorder were major problems that affected the mind. At present, medical science was still unable to perfect this field. "Baki, times have changed." Kale showed a confident expression. If it was half a year ago, he really didn't have the confidence to cure Baki's brain, but now the situation was completely different. Now, there was Illusion, who had a soul gem embedded in his forehead, the Scarlet Witch, who had the ability to control minds, and the Wakanda Kingdom, who had advanced neurological medicine. There were probably more than 3 ways to completely cure a brainwashed Baki. With Kale's simple words, Steve suddenly smiled happily. Although Baki tried to hold it in, his body was still trembling with excitement. Letting Yutong take Steve and Kale to the guest room of the palace to rest, Kale closed his eyes and fell into meditation. Howard was not killed by the Winter Soldiers, and the truth of the attack on the Wakanda King was clear. In this way, the civil war between the Avengers was indeed avoided. However, Kale always felt that avoiding civil war was not a good thing. Civil war could be said to be a conflict of ideas and strength. As the saying goes, no discord, no friendship. Through civil war, heroes get to know each other better. When they put down their grudges and joined forces, the team would become stronger. Wait. The original civil war is gone. I can find a suitable reason to let them fight again. Kale opened his eyes and suddenly had an idea. He immediately took out a pen and paper from the card space. Boss. They have already arranged it. You should go to sleep. As soon as Yutong returned to the main hall, she saw that her boss seemed to be in high spirits. He was thinking, and writing something on the white paper on the table. Yutong, you're here at the right time. Seeing that Yutong had returned, Kale took a deep breath, handed the white paper to her, and ordered, arrange it now. In the name of the Cow country, send out invitations to the people on the list tomorrow. Invitations? Yutong blinked curiously. She took the list and glanced at it casually. Her beautiful eyes immediately showed surprise. The Avengers were on the list, including Thor, Poison Agent, and most of the members. There were also second-generation Ant-Man, Spider-Man, and even the Ancient One and Dr. Stephen who had not joined the Alliance. It could be said that the people on this list were not ordinary people. If they were not superpowered, they were superheroes. Boss. You invited them all here to declare war on Thanos? Yutong looked at Kale in confusion. It's not that early. I invited them to the Cow country because I want to hold Earth's first superpower duel. Kale's eyes flashed. Since there was no civil war, he might as well hold a public duel and gather all the inhuman combat power on Earth. Earth's first superpower duel. Yutong muttered to herself. The name was a little long and a little strange, but she quickly understood Kale's meaning. The main purpose of this superpower duel was to let the heroes behind the world show their true selves in front of the world. Not only would it let the heroes understand each other better and maintain their fighting spirit to improve their combat power, but it would also let the people of Earth see their superpowers that were unknown to them. It would plant a seed of evolution and understanding in their hearts. Not to mention, using the superpower duel to protest the Sokovia Agreement was indeed a very clever strategy. Since we're holding a superpower duel, there should be enough attractive prizes. Kale held his chin, thought for a while, and said decisively, the prize for the 3rd place is a vibranium, a krypton, and an eternal flame. Boss, this is a big deal. Yutong was shocked. This was only the 3rd place, and everything inside was priceless. Kale continued, the 2nd place winner. I can grant him a wish. This wish can be 100 years of life or an ability card, as long as it's within the scope of what I can grant. This. Yutong's eyes widened. She had to admit that this prize was tempting even to her. As for the 1st place. Kale's lips curled up. As he drew the card, a gem with blue light appeared in his hand. Use this as the prize. Boss, this is a joke, right? Yutong was really shocked this time. That was a space origin stone. The prize for the 1st place of the superpower duel was a space origin stone? Probably no civilization in the entire universe would play like this. Kale smiled calmly. Don't worry. I will also participate in this competition as a participant. I knew it. Yutong heaved a sigh of relief. With Boss around, this space origin stone was probably just a gimmick. Even so, this competition would still be recorded in history and change the world. Kale kept the space origin stone and said, "Go." Not only the people on the list, as long as their strength meets the requirements, they can all participate. This superpower duel will be held 3 days later at the training arena in the Cow country. Skynet will broadcast the entire competition live. Chapter 6:14. The next morning. Long Island, New York, a luxurious villa by the sea cliff. Pepper, in her formal secretary attire, came to the underground workshop in her high heels. He opened the door. Tawny, who had changed into casual clothes, was busy modifying the armor on the workbench. Tawny. I knew it. Whenever you're in a bad mood, you'll be here with the mechanical armor. Pepper leaned against the door and said with a smile. I'm sorry. When I'm in a good mood, I'll also stay here. Tawny retorted casually. He looked up at Pepper and saw that she was holding a stack of documents. He asked, "What? It's early in the morning. Do you want me to get busy again? I've already decided to rest for half a week. I won't even meet the president." Pepper rolled her eyes at him and said softly, "Just now. The new king of Wakanda, Chara, announced to the public that he had caught the real culprit who killed his father, and took the initiative to revoke the arrest warrant against Winter Soldier Baki." Tawny's expression didn't change at all. However, when he picked up the armor, his hand trembled involuntarily. It was apparent that he wasn't concerned about this matter. Pepper continued, "If that's the case, Mr. Steve, you can't be considered to have helped the criminal escape. You can be considered to have saved your reputation." His actions were too impulsive and reckless. Tawny put down the armor and couldn't help but comment, if not for Godfather's intervention this time, he might have fallen into darkness. Pepper shook her head and said softly, "But now it seems that he might have done the right thing." Tawny didn't linger on this topic any longer. He asked, "Did you come here to tell me about this on purpose?" "Of course. I know that a certain man couldn't sleep last night because he was concerned about the aftermath of last night's incident." Pepper teased. She then took out an invitation letter from her bosom and returned to the main topic. "All right, let's go. This morning, Kale's godfather sent an invitation to you." "Godfather's invitation? Let me see." Tawny's interest was immediately piqued. He took the initiative to step forward, took the invitation, and opened it to read. His face was first shocked, then puzzled, and finally turned into serious contemplation. "What's wrong? What's written on the invitation?" Pepper asked curiously. After all, it was Godfather's invitation, and she hadn't opened it yet. Something big is about to happen. Tawny folded the invitation and looked at the armor on the workbench. Since it was Godfather's invitation, and it was the Cow country that his father had designed, there was no reason for him not to go. However, he had just signed the Sokovia agreement last night. "What's wrong? Why do you look so conflicted?" Pepper was even more puzzled. "Get ready." Tawny sighed softly and handed the invitation to Pepper. "We're leaving for the Cow country the morning after tomorrow." New York First High School. In the grade 1 classroom, Peter sat on a chair with his chin in his hand. His eyes were blank as he stared blankly into space. Roar! Carrying his bag, Ned suddenly rushed to the table, wanting to scare Peter. However, Peter glanced at him and continued to stare at the blackboard in a daze. Fatty Ned put his hands on the table and looked at him in surprise. I said, what's wrong with you recently? You're so listless. It's none of your business. Peter was still listless. He had completely adapted to high school life. However, in terms of love, he still hadn't made friends with the girl he adored, Liz Allen. In terms of his dream career, Tony Stark hadn't looked for him recently. Both his love and career had fallen, which made Peter feel even more disappointed. Ned patted Peter's shoulder and whispered into his ear, "Be happy. Let me tell you a piece of breaking news. In 2 days, Skynet will have a world-class event. It happens to be a Sunday. I'll go to your house then, and we'll use VR equipment to log on to Skynet and play." Okay. Peter nodded in agreement, but he still wasn't interested. After Ned returned to his seat, Peter was about to take out his textbook from the drawer when he found a strange letter with a devil logo on the seal. On the outside of the envelope was written, "To Little Spider-Man, Peter Parker." The sender was, Kyle Carl, Generation 1. Mr. Kale? With the invitation in his hand, Peter stood up abruptly, causing the students in the classroom to look at him strangely. Boring. MJ looked at Peter with even more disdain. Pym Technology Industry. In the laboratory with the enlarged worker ants as employees, Hank Pym and his daughter Hope were conducting research on the Pym particles. "Look, you two." At this moment, Scott danced into the laboratory and showed them the invitation in his hand. "This is a symbol of peace, an invitation from Mr. Kale. He wants me to go to the Cal country to participate in the superpower competition. This must be an affirmation for me, right? Ant-Man, go go go." Hank and Hope looked at Scott, who was standing at the door, as if they were looking at a retard. The two of them did not say anything and returned to their research. Hey. Scott was deeply shocked and exclaimed, "The prizes for the top 3 of the competition are unprecedented. And the contestants can also bring their loved ones or family members to the Cal country to watch the competition." Hope said mercilessly, "With your level, you've probably been to the finals. Don't underestimate me. I've recently studied a secret move." Scott clenched his fist and said unhappily, "I'm not interested in the competition, but I do know about the Cal country. A few days ago, that old guy Howard also sent me a message and asked me to go and take a look." Hank pondered for a moment and agreed. "Then let's go. Just treat it as a vacation and travel." Hope snorted coldly. Sure. As long as Scott doesn't lose the Ant-Man name." Camartage, Mage Temple. In the main hall, Alpha Centauri, who always wore a yellow robe, sat cross-legged with an open invitation on the table. In front of her stood Mage Mo-Du, Mage Supreme. Mo-Du's dark face was full of confusion. He questioned, "Us mages have been in seclusion for hundreds of years, protecting Earth in secret. This superpower competition is obviously a big fight, and it's a show in front of the world. Are we really going to step into this muddy water?" Alpha Centauri did not speak. After a long silence, she said indifferently, "Times have changed." Such a simple sentence could not be accepted by Mo-Du for a moment, but he knew that the Ancient One had made up her mind. No matter how much he said, it was useless. He could only pray that the Ancient One's decision this time was the right one. "How's Steven?" Alpha Centauri asked. Mo-Du replied, "He's officially a beginner. Now he only knows a few beginner spells." Alpha Centauri said calmly, "Then that's fine. This time, bring him along. You and I, the 3 of us will go to the Cal country the day after tomorrow." "Yes." Mo-Du agreed helplessly. Chapter 6:15. 2 days later. In the Cal country suspended 10,000 meters above the Atlantic Ocean, in an ultramodern bustling neighborhood. Wow! Peter and Ned, who were carrying backpacks respectively, stood in front of the crowded street. They looked at the warship-shaped buildings, sky gardens, and new things like hovering cars that they had never seen before. Their mouths were wide open in shock, enough to stuff 2 eggs in. This is great. This is like the future city in the Star Wars game. To be able to see it with my own eyes, am I dreaming? The fat on Ned's face trembled, and he looked around like a country bumpkin. Peter was not much better than Ned. While marveling at the advanced and spectacular cow country, he looked at Ned helplessly. 2 days ago, after he received the invitation, he often went out to exercise in a spider suit in order to let the world know the name of Spider-Man in the superpower competition. As a result, this morning, when Peter went home to pack his things and was about to rush to the pickup location of the invitation, he was bumped into by his friend Ned, who was waiting in his room with VR equipment. In desperation, Peter could only tell Ned that he was Spider-Man and that he had to hide from Aunt May to participate in the competition, and then bring him along. Ned excitedly put his arm around Peter's shoulder and encouraged him, "Peter, don't be nervous. Didn't you say that you know Iron Man? Maybe he will also participate in the competition this time. Do your best and play well." "I wasn't nervous at first, but now that you said that, I'm a little nervous." Peter took a deep breath and covered his chest with his racing heart. This day might be the key day for him to debut as a hero. He wanted to prove his value to Mr. Stark and Mr. Kale today. "That's right. Where should we go now?" Ned scratched his head and looked at the strange shining street blankly. Just now, K2 left them here and drove the hovering car away. "You ask me, who should I ask? It's my first time here too." Peter spread his hands. Whoosh! A cool-looking hover motorcycle with blue flames spurting from its tail suddenly descended from the sky and landed beside the two of them. Cool! Ned's eyes lit up. The hovering motorcycle was even more eye-catching than a hovering car. Moreover, the driver of the motorcycle was a tall and strong young man. He was wearing a black motorcycle suit and a black and gold helmet that covered his face. The motorcyclist reminded them coldly, "Kids, this is a special period. It's very dangerous to wander around here." This voice, "You are?" Peter's eyes widened in disbelief. Confirming his reaction, the black gold helmet worn by the motorcyclist faded away like a thread, revealing a face that had experienced the vicissitudes of life. "Mr. Eddie, why are you here?" Peter exclaimed. "I've always lived here." Eddie rolled his eyes in annoyance. In the past, family cow members were scattered all over the world. Since the cow country was built, K2 and his family all lived in the cow country. "Who is he, Peter? Do you know him?" Ned was surprised. Peter lowered his voice and explained to Ned, "His name is Eddie Carl. He's a member of Family Cow. He should be considered a member of the Avengers." Cool. Ned was even more excited. He coughed and said truthfully, "Mr. Eddie, actually, the two of us are lost. We don't know how to get to the duel arena." Looking at Peter, who lowered his head in shame, Eddie smiled and gestured behind him. "You're also going to participate in the competition, right? Hurry up and get in the car. I'm going the same way." "All right." Ned was not polite to Eddie. He pulled Peter and the two of them sat on the hovering motorcycle driven by Eddie. "Sit tight." Eddie had just finished speaking. In the next moment, with the roaring sound of brakes, the motorcycle rushed into the sky, leaving behind two horrifying whales in the sky above the cow country. In front of the sword-shaped palace, in the central square. Before the official start of the competition at noon, the huge square was bustling with noise and excitement. The contestants, the visiting family members, and the residents of the cow country were all gathering here in an endless stream. Eddie led Peter and Ned to the middle of the square. Peter looked around, either strangely shaped or muscular contestants, and his body instinctively tensed up. "Mr. Eddie, will all the heroes of the Avengers participate in this competition?" Ned asked as if they were familiar with each other. Eddie shrugged and replied, "As far as I know, almost everyone should be here." Not to mention that the prizes for the top 3 are extremely rich, the top 8 will be rewarded with generous points. Of course, some people will come not only for the prizes, but also to witness the change of an era. The change of an era? Peter and Ned looked at Eddie in surprise. That's right. Eddie nodded and did not explain further. Kale's superpower duel was prepared for superpowers and heroes on the surface, but in fact, it was to give the countries and ordinary people in the world a head-on blow. He told them not to be afraid of the future and to be conservative. He told them that the current era had changed. Instead of stopping superpowers from moving, it was better to adapt to the pace of the times. Can you be a little more obedient, you piece of rags? The sudden dispute in the square in front of them attracted the attention of Eddie and the other 2. They approached and were shocked to find a white man in his early 30s arguing with a cloak. Yes, that's right. The white man was wearing a strange robe and holding a corner of the dark red cloak in his hand. The cloak seemed to have its own thoughts and floated in the air, wanting to fly to the other side of the square. Beside the white man stood a bald woman and a black man. The 3 of them were wearing strange robes and attracted the attention of many people. Okay. Alpha Centauri reached out and stroked the cloak. The cloak immediately hung down and automatically hung back on the white man's back. Sorcerer Supreme, this way. Glancing at the onlookers, Mo.Do reached out and guided Alpha Centauri and Steven to go first. He walked at the back and the 3 quickly disappeared into the crowd. Did you see that? The cloak was flying. Is that magic? Or is it magic? It seems that the legends do exist. Camartage, is it too late to withdraw now? Some people whispered in disgust. Eddie watched Alpha Centauri and the others leave and said to Peter, "Little Spider, those 3 are not simple, especially that woman. If you meet her in the competition, you'd better surrender." Peter nodded silently. Although it was only for a moment, his spider senses, including Peter's, still caught the amazing pressure from Alpha Centauri. Wow, there are so many people here. Scott, calm down. Don't embarrass PIM technology. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly entered Peter's ears. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.